Welcome to the Nerdjacker's Vault. Today we are reading The Book of Lord Shang by Chinese statesman Shang Yang, translated by J.J.L. Divendak. Chapter 1. Reform of the Law. Duke Xiao discussed his policy. The three great officers, Gongsun Yang, Ganlong, and Du Ji, were in attendance on the prince. Their thoughts dwelt on the vicissitudes of the world's affairs. They discussed the principles of rectifying the law, and they sought for the way of directing the people. The prince said, not to forget, at his succession, the tutelary spirits of the soil and of grain is the way of a prince. To shape the laws and to see to it that an intelligent ruler reigns are the tasks of a minister. I intend now to alter the laws so as to obtain orderly government and to reform the rights so as to teach the people. But I am afraid the empire will criticize me. Gongsun Yang said, I have heard it said that he who hesitates in action does not accomplish anything, and that he who hesitates in affairs gains no merit. Let your highness settle your thoughts quickly about altering the laws and perhaps not heed the criticism of the empire. Moreover, he who conducts himself as an outstanding man is, as a matter of course, disapproved of by the world. He who has thoughts of independent knowledge is certainly despised by the world. The saying runs, the stupid do not even understand an affair when it has been completed, but the wise see it even before it has sprouted. One cannot let the people share in the thoughts about the beginnings of an affair, but they should be allowed to share in the rejoicings over the completion of it. The law of Guoyan says, he who is concerned about the highest virtue is not in harmony with popular ideas. He who accomplishes a great work does not take counsel with the multitude. The law is an expression of love for the people. Rights are a means for making things run smoothly. Therefore a sage, if he is able to strengthen the state thereby, does not model himself on antiquity, and if he is able to benefit the people thereby, does not adhere to the established rights. Duke Xiao expressed his approval, but Ganlong said, not so. I have heard it said, a sage teaches without changing the people, and a wise man obtains good government without altering the laws. If one teaches in accordance with the spirit of the people, success will be achieved without effort. If one governs, holding on to the law, officials will be well versed in it, and the people will live quietly. Now, if your highness alters the laws without adhering to the old customs of the Qin state, and reforms the rights in order to teach the people, I am afraid that the empire will criticize your highness, and I wish that you would reflect maturely. Gongsun Yang replied, what you, sir, hold is the point of view of the man in the street. Indeed, ordinary people abide by old practices, and students are immersed in the study of what is reported from antiquity. These two kinds of men are all right for filling offices and for maintaining the law, but they are not the kind who can take part in a discussion which goes beyond the law. The three dynasties have attained supremacy by different rights, and the 5 lords protector have attained their protectorships by different laws. Therefore, a wise man creates laws, but a foolish man is controlled by them. A man of talent reforms rights, but a worthless man is enslaved by them. With a man who is enslaved by rights, it is not worthwhile to speak about matters. With a man who is controlled by laws, it is not worthwhile to discuss reform. Let your highness not hesitate. Gongsun Yang said, former generations did not follow the same doctrines, so what antiquity should one imitate? The emperors and kings did not copy one another, so what rights should one follow? Fuxi and Shennong taught but did not punish. Huangdi, Yao and Shun punished but were not angry. Wenwang and Wuwang both established laws in accordance with what was opportune and regulated rights according to practical requirements. As rights and laws were fixed in accordance with what was opportune, regulations and orders were all expedient, and weapons, armor, implements, and equipment were all practical. Therefore I say, there is more than one way to govern the world, and there is no necessity to imitate antiquity in order to take appropriate measures for the state. Tang and Wu succeeded in attaining supremacy without following antiquity, and as for the downfall of Yin and Xia, they were ruined without rites having been altered. Consequently, those who acted counter to antiquity do not necessarily deserve blame, nor do those who followed established rites merit much praise. Let your Highness not hesitate. Duke Xiao said, "Excellent. I have heard it said that in poor country districts much is thought strange, and that in village schools there are many debates. What the foolish laugh about, the wise are sad about. The joy of a madman is the sorrow of a man of talent. One should, in one's plans, be directed by the needs of the times. I have no doubts about it." Thereupon, in consequence, he issued the order to bring wastelands under cultivation. Chapter 2. Order to cultivate wastelands. If there is no procrastination in the creating of order, depraved officials have no opportunity of gaining private profits at the expense of the people, nor will the 100 officials be in a condition to temporize and to shift responsibilities onto one another. If the 100 officials are not in a condition to temporize and shift responsibilities onto one another, then agriculture will know days of surplus. And if the depraved officials have no opportunity of gaining private profits at the expense of the people, then agriculture will not be ruined. If agriculture is not ruined, but knows days of surplus, then it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. If taxes are levied according to the measure of grain, then the ruler will have system, and consequently the people will have peace. If the ruler has system, he will be a man of his word, and being a man of his word, the officials will not dare to commit any depravity. If the people have peace, they are circumspect, and being circumspect, they are difficult to move. If the ruler is a man of his word, and in consequence the officials dare not commit any depravity, and if the people are circumspect and consequently difficult to move, then there will be no criticism by inferiors of superiors, nor will the officials be regarded as obnoxious. If so, then the able-bodied will be strenuous in agriculture, without changing. If the able-bodied are so, then the youthful will learn it without resting, and when the youthful learn it without resting, it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. If dignities are not conferred nor office given according to deviating standards, then the people will not prize learning, nor, besides, will they hold agriculture cheap. If they do not prize learning, they will be stupid, and being stupid, they will have no interest in outside things. When they have no interest in outside things, the country will exert itself in agriculture and not neglect it. And when the people do not hold agriculture cheap, the country will be peaceful and free from peril. If the country is peaceful and free from peril, exerts itself in agriculture and does not neglect it, then it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. If salaries are liberal and consequently taxes numerous, then the large number of persons who live on others would mean ruin for agriculture. But if they are assessed according to the calculated number of persons who live on others and are made to work hard, then the wicked and licentious, idle and lazy will have nothing on which to live, and having nothing on which to live, they will take up agriculture. When they take up agriculture, then it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. Do not allow merchants to buy grain, nor farmers to sell grain. If farmers may not sell their grain, then the lazy and inactive ones will exert themselves and be energetic. And if merchants may not buy grain, then they have no particular joy over abundant years. Having no particular joy over abundant years, they do not make copious profit in years of famine. And making no copious profit, merchants are fearful, and being fearful, they desire to turn farmers. If lazy and inactive farmers exert themselves and become energetic, and if merchants desire to turn farmers, then it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. If music and fine clothing do not penetrate to all the districts, the people, when they are at work, will pay no attention to the latter, and when they are at rest, will not listen to the former. If, at rest, they do not listen to the one, their spirits will not become licentious. And if, at work, they pay no attention to the other, their minds are concentrated. If their minds are concentrated and their spirits not licentious, then it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. If it is impossible to hire servants, great prefects and heads of families are not supported, and beloved sons cannot eat in laziness. If lazy people cannot be inactive, and hirelings do not find a livelihood, there will certainly be agriculture. When great prefects and heads of families are not supported, agricultural affairs will not suffer. And when beloved sons cannot eat in laziness, and lazy people cannot be inactive, then the fields will not lie fallow. If agricultural affairs do not suffer and farmers increase their farming, then it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. If hostelries for the reception of travelers are abolished, criminals, agitators, conspirators, and those who unsettle the minds of the farmers will not travel, and in consequence, hotel keepers will have no means of subsistence. This being so, they will certainly become farmers, and so it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. If mountains and moors are brought into one hand, then the people who hate agriculture, the tardy and lazy, and those who desire double profit will have no means of subsistence. This being so, they will certainly become farmers, and so it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. If the prices of wine and meat are made high, and the taxes on them so heavy that they amount to 10 times the cost of production, then merchants and retailers will be few, farmers will not be able to enjoy drinking bouts, and officials will not overeat. If merchants and retailers are few, the ruler does not waste his grain. If the people are unable to enjoy drinking bouts, agriculture will not be neglected. If officials do not overeat, the affairs of the state will not be delayed, and the prince will not err in his promotions. If the ruler does not waste the grain, and if the people do not neglect agriculture, then it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. If penalties are made heavy, and relations are involved in the punishments, petty and irascible people will not quarrel, intractable and stubborn people will not litigate, slothful and lazy people will not idle. Those who waste their substance will not thrive, and those of evil heart given to flattery will bring about no change. If these 5 kinds of people do not appear within the territory, then it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. If people are not allowed to change their abode unauthorizedly, then stupid and irregular farmers will have no means of subsistence and will certainly turn to agriculture. If the minds of stupid people, full of turbulent desires, have been concentrated, then it is certain farmers will be quiet. If the farmers are quiet and stupid people turn to agriculture, then it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. If orders are issued for the service of all younger sons, without exception, the service to last their lifetime, and no high palaces to be built for them, and if orders are given to the grain measuring officials to weigh out their grain allowance evenly, and if on the one hand they are not used for menial services, but on the other hand they do not necessarily obtain high office, then the younger sons will not be idlers, and this being so, they will certainly turn to agriculture. And if that is the case, then it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. If the ministers of state and the great officers are not allowed to occupy themselves with extensive learning, brilliant discussions, and idle living, and if they are not allowed to reside or to travel about in the various districts, then the farmers will have no opportunity to hear of changes or see different places. This being so, clever farmers will have no opportunity to discard old ways, and stupid farmers will not become clever, nor will they become fond of study. If stupid farmers do not become clever nor fond of study, they will apply themselves energetically to agriculture. And if clever farmers do not discard old ways, then it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. Women should not be permitted on the marketplace of the army, but orders to be there should be given to merchants. Men should be commanded to provide themselves with cuirass and arms, to make the army appear in fine condition. Also, if heed is given that there can be no private transport of grain on the army marketplace, then there will be no opportunity to hatch corrupt schemes. If those who transport grain dishonestly cannot, from selfish motives, be negligent, frivolous, and lazy people will not loiter about the army marketplace. And if those who steal grain have no opportunity of selling, and those who send grain can make no private profit, and if frivolous and lazy people do not loiter about the army marketplace, then farmers will not be licentious. If they are not licentious, the government's grain need not be resorted to, and this being the case, it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. If the administration of all the districts is of one pattern, then people will be obedient. Eccentric ones will not be able to be ostentatious, and successive officials will not dare to make changes. And if they act wrongly and abolish the existing administration, it will be impossible to keep their actions hidden. If their mistaken actions do not remain hidden, then among the officials there will be no depraved men. And if eccentric people cannot be ostentatious, and successive officials make no changes, then the official appurtenances will be few, and the people will not be harassed. If the officials are not depraved, the people will not seek amusement, and if the people do not seek amusement, their occupations will not suffer. If official appurtenances are few, taxes will not be troublesome, and if the people are not harassed, farming will know days of plenty. If farming knows days of plenty, taxes are not troublesome, and occupations do not suffer, then it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. If the tolls at the barriers and on the market are made heavy, then the farmers will hate the merchants, and the merchants will be full of doubt and be unenterprising. If the farmers hate the merchants, and the merchants are full of doubt and unenterprising, then it is certain wastelands will be brought under cultivation. If merchants are made to serve according to their full complement, and if their multitudes of servants and crowds of followers are obliged to be registered, then farmers will have leisure and merchants will be harassed. Farmers having leisure, fertile land will not lie fallow. Merchants being harassed, the custom of sending presents backwards and forwards will not pervade the various districts. If fertile land does not lie fallow, farmers will not suffer from famines, and if the custom of sending presents backwards and forwards does not pervade the various districts, there will be no ostentatious conduct. If farmers do not suffer from famines, and there is no ostentatious conduct, then public activities will be pursued with energy, and in the sphere of private activities there will be no fallow fields. This being so, then agricultural affairs will certainly excel, and this being the case, it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. If in transporting grain for official use, carters are prohibited from plying for hire and returning with private cargo, and if measures are taken to ensure the registration of carts, oxen, carriages, and baggage wagons, the expedition backward and forward will thus be quick, and then this occupation will not harm agriculture. Agriculture not being harmed, it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. If it is not permitted to petition officials on behalf of wrongdoers, nor to provide them with food, then criminal people will have no patrons. Having no patrons, crimes will not be encouraged. Crimes not being encouraged, criminal people will have no hold. Criminal people having no hold, farmers will not suffer. And if farmers do not suffer, it is certain waste lands will be brought under cultivation. Chapter 3. Agriculture and War. The means whereby a ruler of men encourages the people are office and rank. The means whereby a country is made prosperous are agriculture and war. Now those who seek office and rank never do so by means of agriculture and war, but by artful words and empty doctrines. That is called wearying the people. The country of those who weary their people will certainly have no strength, and the country of those who have no strength will certainly be dismembered. Those who are capable in organizing a country teach the people that office and rank can only be acquired through one opening, and thus, there being no rank without office, the state will do away with fine speaking, with the result that the people will be simple. Being simple, they will not be licentious. The people, seeing that the highest benefit comes only through one opening, will strive for concentration, and having concentration, will not be negligent in their occupations. When the people are not negligent in their occupations, they will have much strength, and when they have much strength, the state will be powerful. But now the people within the territory all say that by avoiding agriculture and war, office and rank may be acquired, with the result that eminent men all change their occupations, to apply themselves to the study of the odes and history and to follow improper standards. On the one hand, they obtain prominence, and on the other, they acquire office and rank. Insignificant individuals will occupy themselves with trade and will practice arts and crafts, all in order to avoid agriculture and war, thus preparing a dangerous condition for the state. Where the people are given to such teachings, it is certain that such a country will be dismembered. The way to organize a country well is, even though the granaries are filled, not to be negligent in agriculture, and even though the country is large and its population numerous, to have no license of speech. This being so, the people will be simple and have concentration. The people being simple and having concentration, then office arid rank cannot be obtained by artfulness. If these cannot be obtained by artfulness, then wickedness will not originate, and if wickedness does not originate, the ruler will not be suspicious. But now the people within the territory, and those who hold office and rank, see that it is possible to obtain from the court office and rank by means of artful speech and sophistry. Therefore, there is no permanency in office and rank, with the result that at court they deceive their ruler and, retiring from court, they think of nothing but of how to realize their selfish interests, and thus sell power to their inferiors. Now deceiving the ruler and being concerned for their own interests is not to the advantage of the state, but those who thus act do so for the sake of rank and emolument. Selling power to inferiors is not proper for a loyal minister, but those who thus act do so for the sake of insignificant presents. Consequently, all the lower officials who hope for promotion say, if we send many presents, we may obtain the higher office which we desire. They say, too, to strive for promotion without serving superiors with presents is like setting a cat as bait for a rat. It is absolutely hopeless. To strive for promotion by serving superiors with sincerity is like wishing to climb a crooked tree by holding on to a broken rope. It is even more hopeless. If, to attain promotion, these two methods are out of the question, what else can we do in striving for it but bring the masses below us into action and obtain presents for the purpose of serving our superiors? The people say, we till diligently, first to fill the public granaries, and then to keep the rest for the nourishment of our parents. For the sake of our superiors, we forget our love of life, and fight for the honor of the ruler, and for the peace of the country. But if the granaries are empty, the ruler debased, and the family poor, then it is best to seek office. Let us then combine relatives and friends and think of other plans. Eminent men will apply themselves to the study of the odes and history and pursue these improper standards. Insignificant individuals will occupy themselves with trade and practice arts and crafts, all in order to avoid agriculture and war. Where the people are given to such teachings, how can the grain be anything but scarce, and the soldiers anything but weak? The way to administer a country well is for the law for the officials to be clear. Therefore, one does not rely on intelligent and thoughtful men. The ruler makes the people single-minded, and therefore they will not scheme for selfish profit. Then the strength of the country will be consolidated. A country where the strength has been consolidated is powerful, but a country that loves talking is dismembered. Therefore, as it said, if there are 1,000 people engaged in agriculture and war, and only one in the odies and history, and clever sophistry, then those 1,000 will all be remiss in agriculture and war. If there are 100 people engaged in agriculture and war, and only one in the arts and crafts, then those 100 will all be remiss in agriculture and war. The country depends on agriculture and war for its peace, and likewise the ruler for his honor. Indeed, if the people are not engaged in agriculture and war, it means that the ruler loves words and that the officials have lost consistency of conduct. If there is consistency of conduct in officials, the country is well governed, and if single-mindedness is striven after, the country is rich. To have the country both rich and well governed is the way to attain supremacy. Therefore, as it said, the way to supremacy is no other than by creating single-mindedness. However, nowadays, the ruler, in his appointments, takes into consideration talent and ability and cleverness and intelligence, and thus clever and intelligent men watch for the likes and dislikes of the ruler, so that officials are caused to transact their business in a way which is adapted to the ruler's mind. As a result, there is no consistency of conduct in the officials, the state is in disorder, and there is no concentration. Sophists are honored, and there is no law. Under such circumstances, how can the people's affairs be otherwise than many, and how can the land be otherwise than fallow? If, in a country, there are the following 10 things: odes and history, rites and music, virtue and the cultivation thereof, benevolence and integrity, sophistry and intelligence, then the ruler has no one whom he can employ for defense and warfare. If a country is governed by means of these 10 things, it will be dismembered as soon as an enemy approaches, and even if no enemy approaches, it will be poor. But if a country banishes these 10 things, enemies will not dare to approach, and even if they should, they would be driven back. When it mobilizes its army and attacks, it will gain victories. When it holds the army in reserve and does not attack, it will be rich. A country that loves strength makes assaults with what is difficult, and thus it will be successful. A country that loves sophistry makes assaults with what is easy, and thus it will be in danger. Therefore sages and intelligent princes are what they are, not because they are able to go to the bottom of all things, but because they understand what is essential in all things. Therefore the secret of their administration of the country lies in nothing else than in their examination of what is essential. But now, those who run a state for the most part overlook what is essential, and the discussions at court on government are confused, and efforts are made to displace each other in them. Thus the prince is dazed by talk, officials confused by words, and the people become lazy and will not farm. The result is that all the people within the territory change and become fond of sophistry, take pleasure in study, pursue trade, practice arts and crafts, and shun agriculture and war, and so in this manner the ruin of the country will not be far off. When the country has trouble, then because studious people hate law, and merchants are clever in bartering and artisans are useless, the state will be easily destroyed. Indeed, if farmers are few, and those who live idly on others are many, then the state will be poor and in a dangerous condition. Now, for example, if various kinds of caterpillars, which are born in spring and die in autumn, appear only once, the result is that the people have no food for many years. Now, if 1 man tills and 100 live on him, it means that they are like a great visitation of caterpillars. Though there may be a bundle of the odies in history in every hamlet and a copy in every family, yet it is useless for good government, and it is not a method whereby this condition of things may be reversed. Therefore the ancient kings made people turn back to agriculture and war. For this reason is it said, where 100 men farm and 1 is idle, the state will attain supremacy. Where 10 men farm and 1 is idle, the state will be strong. Where half farms and half is idle, the state will be in peril. That is why those who govern the country well wish the people to take to agriculture. If the country does not take to agriculture, then in its quarrels over authority with the various feudal lords, it will not be able to maintain itself, because the strength of the multitude will not be sufficient. Therefore the feudal lords vex its weakness and make use of its state of decadence, and if the territory is invaded and dismembered, without the country being stirred to action, it will be past saving. A sage knows what is essential in administrating a country, and so he induces the people to devote their attention to agriculture. If their attention is devoted to agriculture, then they will be simple, and being simple, they may be made correct. Being perplexed, it will be easy to direct them. Being trustworthy, they may be used for defense and warfare. Being single-minded, opportunities of deceit will be few, and they will attach importance to their homes. Being single-minded, their careers may be made dependent on rewards and penalties. Being single-minded, they may be used abroad. Indeed, the people will love their ruler and obey his commandments even to death if they are engaged in farming morning and evening. But they will be of no use if they see that glib-tongued itinerant scholars succeed in being honored in serving the prince, that merchants succeed in enriching their families, and that artisans have plenty to live upon. If the people see both the comfort and advantage of these 3 walks of life, then they will indubitably shun agriculture. Shunning agriculture, they will care little for their homes. Caring little for their homes, they will certainly not fight and defend these for the ruler's sake. Generally speaking, in administrating a country, the trouble is when the people are scattered and when it is impossible to consolidate them. That is why a sage tries to bring about uniformity and consolidation. A state where uniformity of purpose has been established for 1 year will be strong for 10 years. Where uniformity of purpose has been established for 10 years, it will be strong for 100 years. Where uniformity of purpose has been established for 100 years, it will be strong for 1,000 years. And a state which has been strong for 1,000 years will attain supremacy. An ordinary prince cultivates the system of rewards and penalties in order to support his teaching of uniformity of purpose, and in this way his teaching has permanency and his administration is successfully established. But he who attains supremacy succeeds in regulating those things which are most essential for the people, and therefore, even without the need of rewards and gifts, the people will love their ruler. Without the need of ranks and emoluments, the people will follow their avocations. Without the need of penalties, the people will do their duty to the death. When a country is in peril and the ruler in anxiety, it is of no avail to the settling of this danger for professional talkers to form battalions. The reason why a country is in danger and its ruler in anxiety lies in some strong enemy or in another big state. Now, if a prince is unable to vanquish that strong enemy or to destroy that big state, he improves his defenses, makes the best use of the topographical conditions, consolidates the strength of the people, and thus meets the foreign attack. After this, the danger may be averted and supremacy yet attained. That is why an intelligent prince, in improving the administration, strives for uniformity, removes those who are of no use, restrains volatile scholars and those of frivolous pursuits, and makes them all uniformly into farmers. Thereafter, the reigning dynasty may become rich, and the people's strength may be consolidated. Nowadays, the rulers of the world are all anxious over the perilous condition of their countries and the weakness of their armies, and they listen at all costs to the professional talkers. But though these may form battalions, talk profusely, and employ beautiful expressions, it is of no practical use. When a ruler loves their sophistry and does not seek for their practical value, then the professional talkers have it all their own way, expound their crooked sophistries in the streets, their various groups become great crowds, and the people, seeing that they succeed in captivating kings, dukes, and great men, all imitate them. Now if men form parties, the arguments and dissensions in the country will be of confusing diversity. The lower classes will be amused, and the great men will enjoy it, with the result that amongst such a people farmers will be few, and those who, in idleness, live on others will be many. These latter being numerous, farmers will be in a perilous position, and this being so, land will be left lying fallow. If study becomes popular, people will abandon agriculture and occupy themselves with debates, high-sounding words, and discussions on false premises. Abandoning agriculture, they will live on others in idleness and seek to surpass one another with words. Thus the people will become estranged from the ruler, and there will be crowds of disloyal subjects. This is a doctrine which leads to the impoverishment of the state and to the weakening of the army. Indeed, if a country employs people for their talking, then the people will not be nurtured in agriculture. So it is only an intelligent prince who understands that by fondness for words one cannot strengthen the army nor open up the land. Only when a sage rules the country will he strive for singleness of purpose and for the consolidation of the people in agriculture, and for that alone. Chapter 4. Elimination of Strength. To remove the strong by means of a strong people brings weakness. To remove the strong by means of a weak people brings strength. If the country practices virtue, criminals are many. If the country is rich, but is administered as if it were poor, then it is said to be doubly rich, and the doubly rich are strong. If the country is poor, but is administered as if it were rich, it is said to be doubly poor, and the doubly poor are weak. If its army accomplishes what the enemy dares not accomplish, a country is strong. If affairs are undertaken which the enemy is ashamed to perform, a country profits. A ruler values many changes, but the country values few changes. If the country has few products, it will be dismembered, but if it has many products, it will be strong. A country of 1,000 chariots that keeps only one outlet for its products will flourish, but if it keeps 10 outlets, it will be dismembered. If in war its army is efficient, a country will be strong, but if fighting is disorderly and the army unwilling, the country will be dismembered. Farming, trade, and office are the 3 permanent functions in a state, and these 3 functions give rise to 6 parasitic functions, which are called care for old age, living on others, beauty, love, ambition, and virtuous conduct. If these 6 parasites find an attachment, there will be dismemberment. The 3 functions are attached to 3 different men, but these 6 functions may attach themselves to one man. To abolish law by means of the law means strength. To establish law by means of the law means dismemberment. If officials are permanent, law is abolished, but if officials are often transferred, laws are established. In administering a great country, it becomes small. In administering a small country, it becomes great. If the people are made strong, the army will be doubly diminished. If the people are made weak, the army will be doubly strengthened. Indeed, to attack the strong with a strong people spells ruin. To attack the strong with a weak people means the attainment of supremacy. If the country is strong and war is not waged, the poison will be carried into the territory. Rites and music and the parasitic functions will arise, and dismemberment will be inevitable. But if the country being strong thereupon wages war, the poison will be carried to the enemy, and not suffering from rites and music and the parasitic functions, it will be strong. If those who exert themselves are promoted and men of merit are employed in office, the country will be strong. But if the parasitic functions arise, dismemberment will be inevitable. If farmers are few and merchants numerous, men in high positions will be poor, merchants will be poor, and farmers will be poor. These three functions all being poor, dismemberment is inevitable. If in a country there are the following 10 evils, rites, music, odes, hist virtue, moral culture, filial piety, brotherly duty, integrity, and sophistry, the ruler cannot make the people fight, and dismemberment is inevitable, and this brings extinction in its train. If the country has not these 10 things, and the ruler can make the people fight, he will be so prosperous that he will attain supremacy. A country where the virtuous govern the wicked will suffer from disorder so that it will be dismembered. But a country where the wicked govern the virtuous will be orderly so that it will become strong. A country which is administered by the aid of odes, history, rites, music, filial piety, brotherly duty, virtue, and moral culture will, as soon as the enemy approaches, be dismembered. If he does not approach, the country will be poor. But if a country is administered without these 8, the enemy dares not approach, and even if he should, he would certainly be driven off when it mobilizes its army and attacks. It will capture its objective, and having captured it, will be able to hold it. When it holds its army in reserve and makes no attack, it will be rich. A country that loves force is said to attack with what is difficult. A country that loves words is said to attack with what is easy. A country that attacks with what is difficult will gain 10 points for every 1 point that it undertakes, whereas a country that attacks with what is easy will lose 100 men for every 10 that it marches out. If penalties are made heavy and rewards light, the ruler loves his people, and they will die for him. But if rewards are made heavy and penalties light, the ruler does not love his people, nor will they die for him. When in a prosperous country penalties are applied, the people will reap profit, and at the same time stand in awe. When rewards are applied, the people will reap profit and at the same time have love. A country that has no strength and that practices knowledge and cleverness will certainly perish, but a fearful people, stimulated by penalties, will become brave, and a brave people, encouraged by rewards, will fight to the death. If fearful people become brave and brave people fight to the death, the country will have no match. Having no match, it will be strong, and being strong, it will attain supremacy. If the poor are encouraged by rewards, they will become rich, and if penalties are applied to the rich, they will become poor. When in administrating a country one succeeds in making the poor rich and the rich poor, then the country will have much strength, and this being the case, it will attain supremacy. In a country that has supremacy, there are 9 penalties as against 1 reward. In a strong country, there will be 7 penalties to 3 rewards, and in a dismembered country, there will be 5 penalties to 5 rewards. A country where uniformity of purpose has been established for 1 year will be strong for 10 years. Where uniformity of purpose has been established for 10 years, it will be strong for 100 years. Where uniformity of purpose has been established for 100 years, it will be strong for 1,000 years. And a country that has been strong for 1,000 years will attain supremacy. One who has prestige captures 10 by means of 1, and grasps concrete things by means of the very sound of his name. Therefore, he who succeeds in having prestige attains supremacy. A country which knows how to produce strength but not how to reduce it may be said to be a country that attacks itself, and it is certain that it will be dismembered. But a country that knows how to produce strength and how to reduce it may be said to be one that attacks the enemy, and it is certain that it will become strong. Therefore, the combating of the parasites, the curtailing of its energies, and the attacking of its enemy. If a country employs two of these methods and sets aside only one, it will be strong. But that which employs all three methods will have so much prestige that it will attain supremacy. A country where 10 hamlets are the smallest unit for judgments will be weak. A country where 9 hamlets are the smallest unit for judgments will be strong. He who can create order in one day will attain supremacy. He who creates order in a night will be strong, and he who procrastinates in creating order will have his state dismembered. If the whole population is registered at birth and erased at death, there would be no people who would escape agriculture, and in the fields there would be no fallow land. Thus the country would be rich, and being rich it would be strong. If penalties are removed by means of penalties, the country will enjoy order, but if penalties are set up by means of penalties, the country will be in disorder. Therefore is it said, in applying penalties, punish heavily the light offenses. If punishments are abolished, affairs will succeed and the country will be strong. But if heavy offenses are punished heavily and light offenses lightly, penalties will appear, trouble will arise, and such a state will be dismembered. Punishment produces force, force produces strength, strength produces awe, awe produces kindness. Kindness has its origin in force. The appearance of gold means the disappearance of grain, and the appearance of grain means the disappearance of gold. If products are cheap, those who occupy themselves with agriculture being many and buyers being few, farmers will be in hard straits and wickedness will be encouraged, so that the army will be weak and the state will certainly be dismembered and come to extinction. For every ounce of gold appearing within its borders, 12 pickles of grain will disappear abroad. But for every 12 pickles of grain appearing within its borders, 1 ounce of gold will disappear abroad. If a country favors the appearance of gold within its borders, then gold and grain will both disappear, granary and treasury will both be empty, and the state will be weak. But if a country favors the appearance of grain within its borders, then gold and grain will both appear, granary and treasury will both be filled, and the state will be strong. A strong country knows 13 figures, the number of granaries within its borders, the number of able-bodied men and of women, the number of old and of weak people, the number of officials and of officers, the number of those making a livelihood by talking, the number of useful people, the number of horses and of oxen, the quantity of fodder and of straw. If he who wishes to make his country strong does not know these 13 figures, though his geographical position may be favorable and the population numerous, his state will become weaker and weaker until it is dismembered. A country where there are no dissatisfied people is called a strong country. When the army is mobilized for an offensive, rank is given according to military merit, and reliance being placed upon the military, victory is certain. When the army is in reserve and agriculture is pursued, rank is given according to the production of grain, and reliance being placed upon farming, the country will be rich. If in military enterprises the enemy is conquered, and if, when the army is in reserve, the country becomes rich, then it attains supremacy. Chapter 5. Discussion about the people. Sophistry and cleverness are an aid to lawlessness. Rites and music are symptoms of dissipations and license. Kindness and benevolence are the foster mother of transgressions. Employment and promotion are opportunities for the rapacity of the wicked. If lawlessness is aided, it becomes current. If there are symptoms of dissipation and license, they will become the practice. If there is a foster mother for transgressions, they will arise. If there are opportunities for the rapacity of the wicked, they will never cease. If these 8 things come together, the people will be stronger than the government. But if these 8 things are non-existent in a state, the government will be stronger than the people. If the people are stronger than the government, the state is weak. If the government is stronger than the people, the army is strong. For if these 8 things exist, the ruler has no one to use for defense and war, with the result that the state will be dismembered and will come to ruin. But if there are not these 8 things, the ruler has the wherewithal for defense and war, with the result that the state will flourish and attain supremacy. If virtuous officials are employed, the people will love their own relatives, but if wicked officials are employed, the people will love the statutes. To agree with and to respond to others is what the virtuous do. To differ from and to spy upon others is what the wicked do. If the virtuous are placed in positions of evidence, transgressions will remain hidden. But if the wicked are employed, crimes will be punished. In the former case, the people will be stronger than the law. In the latter, the law will be stronger than the people. If the people are stronger than the law, there is lawlessness in the state. But if the law is stronger than the people, the army will be strong. Therefore, as it said, governing through good people leads to lawlessness and dismemberment. Governing through wicked people leads to order and strength. A country which attacks with what is difficult will gain 10 points for every one that it undertakes. A country which attacks with what is easy will lose 100 men for every 10 that it marches out. A country that loves force is said to attack with what is difficult. A country that loves words is said to attack with what is easy. People find it easy to talk, but difficult to serve. A state where, when the laws of the country are applied, conditions for the people are hard, and by military service those conditions are eased, so that it attacks with force, will gain 10 points for every one it undertakes. But a state where, when the laws of the country are applied, conditions for the people are easy, and by military service those conditions are made hard, so that it attacks with words, will lose 100 men for every 10 that it marches out. The fact that penalties are heavy makes rank the more honorable, and the fact that rewards are light makes punishments the more awe-inspiring. If rank is honored, the ruler loves the people, and if punishments are so awe-inspiring, the people still die for their ruler. Therefore, in a prosperous country, the people profit by the application of penalties, and by the distribution of rewards the ruler will gain credit. If the law goes into details, the punishments will be multitudinous. If the laws are multitudinous, punishments will be scarce. If, from a condition of rule and order, the people become lawless, and if one tries to rule this lawlessness, it will only increase. Therefore, it should be ruled while it is still in a state of rule and order. Then there will be true rule and order. If it is ruled while it is in a state of lawlessness, lawlessness will remain. It is the nature of the people to be orderly, but it is circumstances that cause disorder. Therefore, in the application of punishments, light offenses should be regarded as serious. If light offenses do not occur, serious ones have no chance of coming. This is said to be ruling the people while in a state of law and order. If in the application of punishments, serious offenses are regarded as serious, and light offenses as light, light offenses will not cease, and in consequence, there will be no means of stopping the serious ones. This is said to be ruling the people while in a state of lawlessness. So, if light offenses are regarded as serious, punishments will be abolished, affairs will succeed, and the country will be strong. But if serious offenses are regarded as serious and light ones as light, then punishments will appear. Moreover, trouble will arise and the country will be dismembered. If the people are brave, they should be rewarded with what they desire. If they are timorous, they should be put to death in a manner they hate. In this way, timorous people, being incited by punishments, will become brave, and the brave, being encouraged by rewards, will fight to the death. If timorous people become brave, and the brave fight to the death, the country having no equal will certainly attain supremacy. If the people are poor, they are weak. If the country is rich, they are licentious. and consequently there will be the parasites. The parasites will bring weakness. Therefore the poor should be benefited with rewards, so that they become rich, and the rich should be injured by punishments, so that they become poor. The important thing in undertaking the administration of a country is to make the rich poor and the poor rich. If that is effected, the country will be strong. If the three classes of people do not suffer from the parasites, the country will be strong for a long time to come, and such a country, free of parasites, may be certain of supremacy. Punishment produces force, force produces strength, strength produces awe, awe produces virtue. Virtue has its origin in punishments. For the more punishments there are, the more valued are rewards, and the fewer rewards there are, the more heed is paid to punishments, by virtue of the fact that people have desires and dislikes. What they desire are the 6 kinds of license, and what they dislike are the 4 kinds of hardship. Indulgence in these 6 kinds of license will make the country weak, but the practice of these 4 kinds of hardship will make the army strong. Therefore, in a country which has attained supremacy, punishments are applied in 9 cases and rewards in 1. If in 9 cases punishments are applied, the 6 kinds of license will stop, and if in 1 case rewards are given, the 4 kinds of hardship will be practiced. If the 6 kinds of license are stopped, the country will be without crime, and if the 4 kinds of hardship are practiced, the army will be without equal. The things which the people desire are innumerable, but that from which they benefit is one and the same thing. Unless the people be made one, there is no way to make them attain their desire. Therefore, they are unified. As a result of this unification, their strength is consolidated, and in consequence of this consolidation, they are strong. If, being strong, they are made use of, they are doubly strong. Therefore, a country that knows how to produce strength and how to reduce it is said to be one that attacks the enemy and is sure to become strong. It bars all private roads for gratifying their ambition and opens only one gate through which they can attain their desire. Thus, without doubt, it can make the people first do what they hate in order thereafter to reach what they desire, and so their strength will be great. If their strength is great but not made use of, ambition is gratified, and this being so, there will be private interest, and in consequence there will be weakness. Therefore, a country that knows how to produce strength but not how to reduce it is said to be one that attacks itself, and it is certain to be dismembered. So it is said that if a state has attained supremacy, it does not reserve its strength, and the family does not hoard grain. That the state does not reserve its strength means that its subjects are used, and that the family does not hoard grain means that the superiors keep it in the granaries. If the order of the country depends on the judgments of the family, it attains supremacy. If it depends on the judgments of the officials, it becomes only strong. If it depends on the judgments of the prince, it becomes weak. If light offenses are heavily punished, punishments will disappear. If officials are permanent, there is orderly administration. The necessary guarantee for restricting the use of punishments is that promises of rewards are kept. If they make it their habit to denounce all crimes, then the people make the judgments in their own minds. And if, when the ruler gives his orders, the people know how to respond, so that the means for enforcing the law are really manufactured in the families and merely applied by the officials, then the judgments over affairs rest with the family. Therefore, in the case of one who attains supremacy, judgments with regard to punishments and rewards rest with the people's own minds, and those with regard to the application of the means for enforcing the law rest with the family. If there is a clear law, people will agree with one another. If there is an obscure law, people will differ from one another. If they agree, things run smoothly, but if they differ, things are hampered. In the former case, there is order, in the latter, disorder. If there is order, it is the families that make judgments, If there is disorder, it is the prince who makes judgments. Those who administer a country deem it important that inferiors should give judgments. Therefore, when 10 hamlets are the unit for making judgments, there will be weakness, whereas when 5 hamlets are the unit for making judgments, there will be strength. If it is the family that gives judgments, there will be abundance. Therefore, of such a country it is said, "He who creates order in one day will attain supremacy." If it is the officials who give judgments, the order will not be sufficient. Therefore, of such a country it is said, "He who creates order in a night will merely be strong." But if it is the prince who gives judgments, there will be disorder. Therefore, of such a country it is said, "He who procrastinates in creating order will be dismembered." Therefore, in a country that has the true way, order does not depend on the prince, and the people do not merely follow the officials. Chapter 6. Calculation of Land. The disasters of the rulers of the world, generally, come from their not measuring their strength in the use of armies, and from their not measuring their territory in managing the grass fields and uncultivated lands. Therefore, sometimes the territory is narrow and the population numerous, so that the population exceeds the territory. Or sometimes the territory is extensive, but the population sparse, so that the territory exceeds the population. If the population exceeds the territory, then one should pay attention to opening up new land. If the territory exceeds the population, then one should set about calling in colonists. By opening up new land, one effects increase. If the population exceeds the territory, then the achievements of the state will be few and the military strength small. If the territory exceeds the population, then the resources of mountains and moors will not be utilized. Now, to neglect natural resources and to pander to the people's dissipations is to fail in one's duty as a ruler. And when high and low act thus, then in spite of a large population, the army will be weak, and in spite of a big territory, its strength will be small. In administering a state, therefore, and in disposing of its territory, to populate the mountains and forests with 1/10 of the people, the marshes and moors with 1/10, the valleys, dales, and streams with 1/10, cities, towns, and highways with 4/10 was the correct rule of the former kings. In administering a state, therefore, and in dividing arable land, if a minimum of 500 mu is sufficient to support one soldier, it is not making proper use of the land. But if a territory of 100 square ali supports 10,000 soldiers for war as a minimum, then it shows that the cultivated land is sufficient to nourish its population, that cities, towns, and highways are sufficient to accommodate their inhabitants, that mountains and forests, marshes and moors, valleys and dales are sufficient to provide profit, and that marshes and moors, dikes and embankments are sufficient for grazing. Therefore, when the army marches out and grain is given them, there is still a surplus of riches. When the army is resting and the people at work, the cattle are always sufficient. This is said to be the rule for making use of the land and for supporting soldiers. But nowadays, although the rulers of the world have territory of several thousand square li, the produce is not sufficient to support the soldiers and to fill the granaries, and the army is equaled by the neighbors. I regret this state of affairs, therefore, on behalf of the ruler. Indeed, having a large territory and not cultivating it is like having no territory. Having a numerous population, but not employing it, is like having no population. Therefore, the statistical method of administering a country is to give attention to the cultivation of the grasslands. The way to employ the soldiers is to pay attention to making uniform rewards. If private gain has been debarred in outside occupations, then the people will be concerned with keeping to agriculture. If they keep to agriculture, they will be simple, and if they are simple, they fear the law. If private rewards are forbidden to those below, then the people will take the offensive forcibly against the enemy. And by taking the offensive against him, they conquer. How does one know that it will be thus? Well, the natural disposition of the people is that if they are simple, they will produce hard work and will exert their strength easily. If they are poor, they will develop common sense and give due consideration to what is profitable. If they exert their strength easily, they will think lightly of death and will enjoy employment in warfare. If they give due consideration to what is profitable, they will fear punishment and will easily suffer hardship. If they easily suffer hardship, then the capacity of the soil will be developed to the full. If they enjoy employment in warfare, military strength will be developed to the utmost. Now, if he who administers a country is able to develop the capacity of the soil to the full, and to cause the people to fight to the death, then fame and profit will jointly accrue. It is the nature of the people when they are hungry to strive for food, when they are tired to strive for rest, when they suffer hardship to seek enjoyment, when they are in a state of humiliation to strive for honor. Such is the natural disposition of the people. If the people strive for gain, then they lose the rules of polite behavior. If they strive for fame, they lose the eternal principles of human nature. How can we conclude that it is so? Well, take now robbers and thieves. They infringe the interdicts of the prince above, and below they fail in the polite behavior of subject and son. Therefore, though their reputations are dishonored and their persons endangered, yet because of the profit they do not desist. Above these are the scholars of the world. Their clothes do not warm their skins, their food does not fill their stomachs. They travail their thoughts, fatigue their 4 limbs, and suffer in their 5 internal organs, and yet they go on increasing their activity. This is not prompted by the eternal principles of human nature, but for the sake of fame. Therefore is it said, where fame and profit meet, that is the way the people will follow. If the ruler controls the handle of fame and profit, so as to be able to acquire success and fame, it is due to statistical method. A sage examines the weights in order to control the handle of the scales. He examines the statistical method in order to direct the people. Statistics is the true method of ministers and rulers and the essential of a state. For never yet has it happened, but that a state of 1,000 chariots that neglected statistics has come into a perilous position, and ministers and rulers that neglected method have experienced disorder. Nowadays, the rulers of the world wish to open up their territory and to govern the population without examining the statistics, and ministers desire to fulfill their task without establishing a method. Therefore, the country has a disobedient population and the ruler refractory ministers. A sage, therefore, in organizing a country causes the people in home affairs to adhere to agriculture and in foreign affairs to scheme for war. Now, agriculture makes the people suffer hardships, and war makes them run dangers, and the means whereby they can be led to encounter hardships and to perform actions that expose them to danger is calculation. For the people, when alive, scheme for profit, and when in danger of death, are anxious for fame. It is necessary to examine whence fame and profit spring. If the profit comes from the soil, then people will use their strength to the full. If fame results from war, then they will fight to the death. Now if, at home, the people are directed to use their strength to the full, then the fields will not lie fallow, and if abroad they are directed to fight to the death, then they conquer their enemies. If enemies are conquered, and at the same time fields do not lie fallow, then without moving, the result will be obtained of having both wealth and strength. But nowadays it is not thus. That which the rulers of the world are particularly concerned about is not at all that of which the state stands in urgent need. In their persons, they have the conduct of Yao and Shun, but in their results they do not even approximate those of Tang or Wu. The mistake lies with the handle which they hold. Let me be permitted to set forth their error. In administrating the country, they reject power and indulge in talking. By talking, their persons become cultivated, but their success is small. So scholars, full of empty talk about the Odis and the Book of History, are held in esteem, so that people become restless and think lightly of their prince. Scholars who are out of office are held in esteem, so that people become estranged and criticize their superiors. Braves are held in esteem, so that the people become quarrelsome and think lightly of prohibitions. Artisans are used so that the people become volatile and easily move their places of abode. Merchants and retailers, though leisurely, yet make profit, so that the people follow their example and discuss their superiors. Therefore, if these 5 kinds of people are used in the state, then fields will lie fallow and the army will be weak. The capital of scholars who are full of empty words lies in their mouths. That of scholars who are out of office lies in their ideas. That of braves in their valor, that of artisans in their hands, and that of merchants and retailers in their bodies. Thus, they can carry their personal capital round to any house on earth. If for the people's capital importance is attached to physical talents, and for their habitat they are dependent on the outside world, then those who carry considerable capital will become temporary sojourners. This would have caused difficulties even to Yao and Shun. Therefore, Tang and Wu prohibited it, with the result that their success was established and their fame made. A sage cannot, with what the world thinks easy, overcome that which it thinks difficult, but he must, by means of what it thinks difficult, overcome that which it thinks easy. So, for example, if the people are stupid, he can overcome it by means of knowledge. If the world is educated, he can overcome it by means of force. When people are stupid, they think force easy, but cleverness difficult. But if the world is clever, then it thinks knowledge easy, but force difficult. So, when Shang Yang taught plowing and attained supreme sway, the leadership was by means of his knowledge. When Tang and Wu made themselves strong and attacked the feudal lords, the subjugation was by means of force. Nowadays, the world is full of cleverness, and people are dissolute, and at this juncture, when the times of Tang and Wu are imitated, to practice the actions of Shang Yang. This part of the text is lost. The next extant part starts as, thus a country of 1,000 chariots hereby falling into a state of disorder. This is paying particular attention to the wrong things. It is people's nature, when measuring, to take the longest part, when weighing, to take the heaviest, when adjusting the scales, to seek profit. If an intelligent prince watches these 3 things diligently, order may be established in the country, and the capacities of the people may be utilized. If the state makes few demands from the people, then the people will make many evasions from those demands. Direct the people at home to adhere to farming, and abroad to be concentrated in warfare. Therefore, a sage's way of administering a country is to prohibit much in order to limit the people's capacity, and to rely on force in order to render trickeries powerless. These 2 methods being used in combination, people within the borders will be single-minded. Being single-minded, they will farm. Farming, they will be simple, and being simple, they will dwell quietly and dislike going out. Therefore, a sage's way of ordering a country is that the people's capital should be stored in the soil, and that dangers should be run abroad by borrowing a temporary habitat. If their capital lies in the soil, they will be simple, and if by borrowing a temporary habitat abroad, dangers would be run, they will be anxious. If at home the people are simple, and abroad they are anxious, then as a result they will exert themselves in farming and be alert in warfare. If the people are zealous in farming, then their capital will be considerable. If they are alert in warfare, the neighboring states will be in danger. If their capital is considerable, then they cannot carry it on their backs and go elsewhere. If the neighboring states are in danger, they will not go where there is no capital. For to go to a place of danger and to borrow a habitat outside, even a madman does not do such a thing. Therefore, a sage, in ordering a country, looking to popular custom, fixes their laws with the result that there is order, and examining the state, gives his attention to what is fundamental, with the result that everything is fitting. When laws are fixed without looking to the customs of the times and without examining the fundamental things of the state, then the people will be in disorder, affairs will be troublesome, so that results will be few. This is what I call error. Now the idea of punishments is to restrain depravity, and the idea of rewards is to support the interdicts. Shame and disgrace, labor and hardship are what the people dislike. Fame and glory, ease and joy are what the people pay attention to. So if the penalties of the country are such that they do not cause dislike, and the titles and emoluments are not worth attention, it is an omen of the ruin of the country. If culprits often escape through the meshes, inferior people will be depraved and dissolute, and will not think of the punishments as deterrents, and thus they will be applied to the people in a haphazard manner. That being so, and the way to fame and glory by means of gain not being one, then superior men will apply power to obtain a name, and inferior people will not avoid what is prohibited. Therefore, the punishments will be numerous. If the superior man does not set up his commands clearly, minor penalties will be applied. If punishments are numerous and minor penalties are applied, the country will have many criminals. Then the rich will not be able to keep their wealth, nor the poor to apply themselves to their occupations. The fields will lie fallow, and the state will be poor. If the fields lie fallow, the people will live by deceit. If the country is poor, the ruler will lack rewards. Therefore, when a sage administers a country, culprits have no government position, and felons do not hold office. If culprits were to hold rank, then the superior man would resign from his position. If felons were to be clothed with brocades and fed with meat, then the inferior man would hope for such advantages. If superior men resigned from their positions, one would be ashamed of merit. If inferior men hoped for such advantages, one would boast of wickedness. So punishments and executions are the means whereby wickedness is stopped, and office and rank are the means whereby merit is encouraged. Nowadays, people spurn the ranks established by the state, and laugh at the punishments set up by it. This evil is caused by the law and method followed. Therefore, the superior man, in handling his authority, unifies the government in order to fix his methods. In establishing offices, he makes rank valuable, to correspond with them, and he makes his appointments, taking people's exertions into account and according to their merit, so that the balance between high and low is even. When this is the case, ministers will be able to exert their strength to the uttermost, and the ruler to exercise autocratic sway. Chapter 7. Opening and Debarring. During the time when heaven and earth were established, and the people were produced, people knew their mothers but not their fathers. Their way was to love their relatives and to be fond of what was their own. From loving their relatives came discrimination, and from fondness of what was their own, insecurity. As the people increased and were preoccupied with discrimination and insecurity, they fell into disorder. At that time, people were intent on excelling others and subjected each other by means of force. The former led to quarrels and the latter to disputes. If in disputes there were no justice, no one would be satisfied. Therefore, men of talent established equity and justice and instituted unselfishness, so that people began to talk of moral virtue. At that time, the idea of loving one's relatives began to disappear, and that of honoring talent arose. Now virtuous men are concerned with love, and the way of talented men is to outvie one another. As people increased and were not restrained, and had for long been in the way of outvying one another, there was again disorder. Therefore a sage who received the administration made divisions of land and property, of men and women. Divisions having been established, it was necessary to have restraining measures, so he instituted interdicts. These being instituted, it was necessary to have those who could enforce them. Thereupon he established officials. These having been established, it was necessary to have someone to unify them. So he set up a prince. Once a prince had been set up, the idea of honoring talent disappeared, and that of prizing honor arose. Thus, in the highest antiquity, people loved their relatives and were fond of what was their own. In middle antiquity, they honored talent and talked of moral virtue, and in later days they prized honor and respected office. Honoring talent means outvying one another with doctrines, but setting up a prince means relegating talented men to unemployment. Loving one's relatives means making selfishness one's guiding principle, but the idea of equity and justice is to prevent selfishness from holding the field. But these three methods did not aim at antagonistic purposes. The guiding principles of the people are base, and they are not consistent in what they value. As the conditions in the world change, different principles are practiced. Therefore it is said that there is a fixed standard in a king's principles. Indeed, a king's principles represent one viewpoint, and those of a minister another. The principles each follows are different, but are one in both representing a fixed standard. Therefore it is said, when the people are stupid, by knowledge one may rise to supremacy. When the world is wise, by force one may rise to supremacy. That means that when people are stupid, there are plenty of strong men but not enough wise, and when the world is wise, there are plenty of clever men but not enough strong. It is the nature of people, when they have no knowledge, to study, and when they have no strength, to submit. So when Shang Yang taught plowing and attained supreme sway, the leadership was by means of his knowledge. When Tang and Wu made themselves strong and attacked the feudal lords, the subjugation was by means of their force. That is, in the case of uneducated people, when they possess no knowledge, they are anxious to learn. In the case of an educated society, not having force, it submits. Therefore, he who wishes to attain supreme sway by means of love rejects punishments, and he who wishes to subjugate the feudal lords by means of force relegates virtue to the background. A sage does not imitate antiquity, nor does he follow the present time. If he were to imitate antiquity, he would be behind the times, and if he follows the present time, he is obstructed by circumstances. The Zhou dynasty did not imitate the Shang dynasty, nor did the Xia dynasty imitate the period of Yu. The three dynasties encountered different circumstances, but all three succeeded in attaining supremacy. So to rise to supremacy, there is a definite way, but to hold it there are different principles. For example, Wu as a rebel seized the empire, and yet he prized obedience to the law. He disputed the empire, and yet exalted compliancy. By force he seized it, but by righteousness he held it. Nowadays strong countries aim at annexation, while weak countries are concerned for defense by force, which means that compared with early times they are not equal to the times of Yu and Xia, and compared with later times they do not practice the principles of Tang and Wu. Because the principles of Tang and Wu are obstructed, of the countries of 10,000 chariots there is not one that does not wage war, and of the countries of 1,000 chariots there is not one that is not on the defense. These principles of Tang and Wu have been obstructed a long time, and none of the rulers of the world is able to develop them. Therefore, there is not a fourth added to the three dynasties, and unless there be an intelligent ruler, there is none who succeeds in being obeyed. Now you want to develop the people by imitating the ancient rulers, but the people of old were simple through honesty, while the people of today are clever through artificiality. Wherefore, if you wish to imitate the ancients, you will have orderly government by promoting virtue, and if you wish to imitate modern times, you will have laws by emphasizing punishments, and this is commonly distrusted. What the world now calls righteousness is the establishment of what people like and the abolishment of what they dislike. And what the world calls unrighteousness is the establishment of what people dislike and the abolishment of that in which they take delight. The names and practice of these two methods may be interchanged. It is necessary to examine this. If you establish what people delight in, then they will suffer from what they dislike. But if you establish what the people dislike, they will be happy in what they enjoy. How do I know that this is so? Because if people are in sorrow, they think, and in thinking they invent various devices. Whereas if they enjoy themselves, they are dissolute, and dissoluteness breeds idleness. Therefore, if you govern by punishment, the people will fear. Being fearful, they will not commit villainies. There being no villainies, people will be happy in what they enjoy. If, however, you teach the people by righteousness, then they will be lax, and if they are lax, there will be disorder. If there is disorder, the people will suffer from what they dislike. What I call profit is the basis of righteousness, but what the world calls righteousness is the way to violence. Indeed, in making the people correct, one always attains what they like by means of what they dislike, and one brings about what they dislike by means of what they like. In an orderly country, punishments are numerous and rewards rare. Therefore, in countries that attain supremacy, there is 1 reward to 9 punishments, and in dismembered countries, 9 rewards to every 1 punishment. Now, in proportion to the gravity or otherwise of the offense, there are light and heavy punishments, and in proportion to the greatness of the virtue, there are large or small rewards. These two differences are constantly applied in the world. If punishments are applied to accomplished crimes, then villainy will not be banished, and if rewards are bestowed for virtuous actions that have been achieved by the people, then offenses will not cease. Now, if punishments cannot banish villainy, nor rewards put an end to offenses, there will doubtless be disorder. Therefore, in the case of one who attains supremacy, punishments are applied at the intent to sin, so that great depravity cannot be bred, and rewards are bestowed on the denouncement of villainy, so that minor sins do not escape unnoticed. If, in governing a people, a condition can be brought about, wherein great depravity cannot be bred, and minor offenses do not escape unnoticed, the state will be orderly, and, being orderly, it is certain to be strong. If one country alone applies this method, there will be order only within its own borders. If 2 countries apply this method, the armies will have some rest. If the whole world applies this method, the highest state of virtue will be re-established. This is my way of reverting to virtue by death penalties, and of making righteousness a corollary to violence. Of old, people lived densely together, and all dwelt in disorder, so they desired that there should be a ruler. However, why the empire was glad to have a ruler was because he would create order. Now, having rulers but no law, the evil is the same as if there were no rulers, and having laws that are not equal to the disorders is the same as if there were no law. The empire does not feel tranquil without a prince, but it takes pleasure in being stronger than the law, and thus the whole world is perturbed. Indeed, there is no greater benefit for the people in the empire than order, and there is no firmer order to be obtained than by establishing a prince. For establishing a prince, there is no more embracing method than making law supreme. For making law supreme, there is no more urgent task than banishing villainy, and for banishing villainy, there is no deeper basis than severe punishments. Therefore, those who attain supremacy, restrained by rewards and encouraged by punishments, seek offenses and not virtue, and rely on punishments in order to abolish punishments. Chapter 8. Unification of Words. When about to establish a state, it is necessary to examine standards and measures, to pay attention to law and order, to be vigilant in government duties, and to consolidate occupations with what is primary. When standards and measures are regulated in accordance with the times, the customs of the country may be changed, and the people will follow the standard regulations. If rules and laws are clear, the officials will commit no depravity. If the duties of the government are dealt with uniformly, the people will be available for use. If occupations with what is primary are consolidated, people will take pleasure in agriculture and will enjoy warfare. Now a sage, in establishing laws, alters the customs and causes the people to be engaged in agriculture night and day. It is necessary to understand this. Indeed, people abide by their avocations and obey the regulations even to death. When the honorific titles which the ruler has instituted and the rewards and penalties which he has established are clear, and when, instead of employing sophists and intriguers, men of merit are set up. The result will be that the people will take pleasure in farming and enjoy warfare, because they see that the ruler honors farmers and soldiers, looks down upon sophists and artisans, and despises itinerant scholars. Therefore, when the people concentrate on one occupation, their families will be rich, and their persons will be distinguished in the country. The ruler opens the way to public benefit and bars the gate of private intrigue, so that the people's strength is developed to the utmost. If toil in one's own interest does not gain distinction in the state, nor is admittance to the prince obtained through the gate of private intrigue, then under these circumstances, meritorious ministers will be encouraged, and in consequence the orders of the ruler will be performed, waste lands will be opened up, dissolute people will disappear, and villainies will not sprout. He who, in administrating a country, is able to consolidate the people's strength and to make their occupation one, will be strong. He who is able to make the people attend to what is primary and to prevent what is secondary is rich. A sage, in administrating a country, is able to consolidate its strength or to reduce it. When standards and measures are clear, then the people's strength is consolidated. If it is consolidated, but not developed, it cannot take effect. If it does take effect, but there are no riches, it will give rise to disorder. Therefore, for one who administers a country, the way to consolidate its strength is to make the country rich and its soldiers strong. The way to reduce the people's force is to attack the enemy and to encourage the people. If one only opens the way without barring the gate, the short will grow long. When it has grown, and one does not attack, there will be villainy. If one debars without opening up, the people will be chaotic. If they are chaotic, and one does not make use of them, their strength will become great. If their strength is great, and one does not attack, there will be villainy and the parasites. So consolidating their strength is brought about by unifying their occupation. Reducing their force is brought about by attacking the enemy. In administrating a country, one should value the single-mindedness of the people. If they are single-minded, they are simple, and being simple, they farm. If they farm, they easily become diligent, and being diligent, they become rich. The rich should be despoiled of their riches by means of titles, so that they do not become dissolute. Those who are dissolute should be divested of their dissoluteness by punishments, so that they may concern themselves with agriculture. Therefore, if one is able only to consolidate force and not to use it, disorder ensues, and one who is able only to reduce force but not to consolidate it will perish. So an intelligent ruler who knows how to combine these two principles will be strong, but that of one who does not know how to combine these two will be dismembered. Indeed, if a people are not orderly, it is because their prince follows inferior ways. And if the laws are not clear, it means that the prince causes disorder to grow. Therefore, an intelligent prince is one who does not follow an inferior way, nor causes disorder to grow, but he establishes himself by maintaining his authority and creates order by giving laws, so that he gains possession of those who are treacherous towards their ruler. Thus, for all officials, respectively, rewards or penalties are fixed, so that employment will have a fixed standard. Under these circumstances, then, the country's regulations will be clear and the people's force will be used to the utmost. The titles granted by the ruler will be honored, and this part of the text is lost. The next extant part starts as will be advanced. The rulers of the present day all desire to govern the people, but their way of helping them is disorderly, not because they take pleasure in disorder, but because they rest on antiquity and do not watch for the needs of the times. That is, the ruler models himself on antiquity, and as a result is hampered by it. Subordinates follow the present and do not change with the times, and when the changes in the customs of the world are not understood, and the conditions for governing the people are not examined, then the multiplication of rewards only leads to punishments, and the lightening of punishments only eliminates rewards. Indeed, the ruler institutes punishments, but the people do not obey. His rewards are exhausted, but crimes continue to increase. For the people in their relation to the ruler think first of punishments and only afterwards of rewards. The sage's way, therefore, of organizing a country is not to imitate antiquity, nor to follow the present, but to govern in accordance with the needs of the times, and to make laws which take into account customs. For laws, which are established without examining people's conditions, do not succeed, but a government which is enacted fittingly for the times does not offend. Therefore, the government of the sage kings examined attentively the people's occupations and concentrated their attention on unifying them and on nothing else. Chapter 9. Establishing Laws. I have heard that when the intelligent princes of antiquity established laws, the people were not wicked. When they undertook an enterprise, the required ability was practiced spontaneously. When they distributed rewards, the army was strong. These three principles were the root of government. Indeed, why people were not wicked when laws were established was because the laws were clear and people profited by them. Why the required ability was practiced spontaneously when an enterprise was undertaken was because merits were clearly defined. And because these were clearly defined, the people exerted their forces, and this being so, the required ability was spontaneously practiced. Why the army was strong when rewards were distributed refers to titles and emoluments. Titles and emoluments are the goal of a soldier's ambition. Therefore, the principle on which princes distributed titles and emoluments was clear. When this was clear, the country became daily stronger, but when it was obscure, the country became daily weaker. Therefore, the principle on which titles and emoluments are distributed is the key to the state's preservation or ruin. The reason why a country is weak or a prince is ruined is not that there are no titles or emoluments, but that the principles followed therein are wrong. The principle followed by the three kings and the 5 lords protector was no other than that of giving titles and emoluments, and the reason that people emulated each other in merit was because the principles which they followed were clear. Thus the way in which intelligent princes utilized their ministers was that their employment was made dependent on the work which they had done, and rewards were bestowed on the merits which they had acquired. When the relation between merit and reward was clear, then the people emulated each other in merit. If, in administering a state, one succeeds in causing the people to exert their strength so that they emulate each other in merit, then the army will certainly be strong. To be of the same rank as others, and yet to stand to them in such relations as subject or concubine points to poverty or wealth. To be of the same territory as others, and yet to be annexed by them points to strength or weakness. To have land, but the prince being in the one case strong and in the other weak, points to disorder or order. If there is a right method, even a territory of a square li is sufficient to give room to the body, and people may be attracted to colonize, And if it but contains a marketplace, riches may become many. Whoever has land cannot be called poor, and whoever has people cannot be called weak. If land is made truly productive, one need not be anxious about not being wealthy. If the people are truly employed, one need not fear force or violence. If virtue be clear and with the right teaching prevailing, one will succeed in utilizing for oneself what the people have. Therefore, the intelligent kings utilized what was not their own, and employed those who were not their own subjects. The point to which intelligent kings attached importance was that of rewarding with titles only men of real merit. If this condition was fulfilled, honor and outer marks of distinction were awarded to them. If there were no honor connected with them, then people would not be anxious for noble rank. And if there were no outer marks of distinction, then people would not be concerned about titles. If titles are easily obtained, then people do not appreciate the highest titles, nor the various other titles. If emoluments and rewards are not obtained through a definite gateway, people will not strive to the death for rank. For a prince there exists the fact that people have likes and dislikes. Therefore, for it to be possible to govern the people, it is necessary that the prince should examine these likes and dislikes. Likes and dislikes are the basis of rewards and punishments. Now the nature of man is to like titles and emoluments, and to dislike punishments and penalties. A prince institutes these two in order to guide men's wills, and he establishes what they desire. Now if titles follow upon the people's exertion of strength, if rewards follow upon their acquisition of merit, and if the prince succeeds in making people believe in this as firmly as they do in the shining of sun and moon, then his army will have no equal. Among the princes of men there are some who bestow titles, but whose army is weak. There are some who grant emoluments, but whose state is poor. There are some who have fixed laws, but who yet suffer disorder. These three things are calamities for a country. For if a ruler of men places the making easy of audiences before the acquiring of merit, then although he bestows titles, his army will be weak. If people, without risking their lives in dangers, can obtain profit and emoluments, then the granting of emoluments will only make the country poor. If the law has neither measures nor figures, then affairs will daily become more complicated, and although laws have been established, yet the result will be that the administration will be in disorder. Therefore, an intelligent prince, in directing his people, will so direct them that they will exert their strength to the utmost in order to strive for a particular merit. And if, when they have acquired merit, riches and honor follow upon it, there will be no bravery in private causes. Therefore, if this teaching spreads and becomes successful, then when that is the case, ministers will be loyal, princes intelligent, order manifest, and the army strong. Therefore, in general, an intelligent prince in his administration relies on force and not on virtue, and thus, without his being anxious or fatigued, merit will be established. When measures and figures have been instituted, law can be followed. Therefore, it is necessary that a ruler of men should pay attention to himself. Indeed, Li Ju saw an autumn's hare at a distance of more than 100 paces, but he could not transfer his sharp vision to others. Wu Huo was able to lift a weight of 1,000 chun, but could not transfer his great strength to others. And indeed sages cannot transfer to others the personality and nature that is inherent in them, but that whereby success may be attained, that is the law. Chapter 10. Method of Warfare. Generally, in the method of warfare, the fundamental principle consists in making government measures supremely prevalent. If this is done, then the people concerned will have no disputes, and having no disputes, they will have no thought of self-interest, but will have the interest of the ruler in mind. Therefore, a real king, through his measures, will cause people to be fearful in fights between various cities, but brave in wars against external foes. If people have been trained to attack dangers with energy, They will, as a result, think lightly of death. Should the enemy be routed as soon as the engagement has begun, and should he not stop in his rout, abstain from further pursuit. Therefore does the art of war say, in a big battle, in the event of victory, pursue the fugitives not further than 10 li. In a small battle, in the event of victory, pursue the fugitives not further than 5 li. When hostilities begin, weigh the strength of the enemy. If your organization is not equal to his, do not engage him in battle. If your provisions are not equal to his, do not protract the war. If the enemy is numerically strong, do not invade his territory. If the enemy is in every way your inferior, attack him without hesitation. Therefore it is said, the great rule of an army is prudence. By estimating the strength of the enemy and by examining one's own hosts, victory or defeat may be known beforehand. The army of a real king does not boast of victory, nor does it harbor rancor for defeat. That it does not boast of victory is because it ascribes it to its clever tactics. That it does not harbor rancor for defeat is because it knows why it has failed. If the relative strength of the armies is well matched, the side that has clever leadership will win, and the side that has inferior leadership will lose. If the organization has its origin in the calculations made in the temple, then it will win, whether the leadership is clever or inferior. He who holds victorious tactics will be so strong that he will attain supremacy. If people are submissive and obey their ruler, then the country will become rich and the army victorious. And if this state of affairs is maintained for long, he will surely attain supremacy. But it is a mistake for an army to penetrate deeply into the enemy's country, in difficult and unsurmountable terrain and cut off in a cul-de-sac. The men will become exhausted, hungry and thirsty as well, and will, moreover, fall victims to disease. This is the way to defeat. Therefore, he who intends to direct the people. This part of the text is lost. The next part starts as, and he who mounts a good horse cannot but be on his guard. Chapter 11. Establishment of fundamentals. Generally, in the utilizing of soldiers, there are 3 stages to victory. Prior to the outbreak of hostilities, laws should be fixed. Laws being fixed, they should become the custom. When they have become customary, supplies should be provided. These 3 things should be done within the country before the soldiers can be sent abroad. For performing these 3 things there are 2 conditions. The first is to support the law so that it can be applied. The second is to obtain the right men in appointments so that the law can be established. For reliance on masses is said to be the assembling of a mob. Reliance on outward appearances is said to be smartness. Reliance on fame and sight is said to be deceitfulness. If one relies on any one of these 3, one's soldiers may be captured. Therefore is it said, the strong are unbending, they fight for what they desire. By fighting, their strength develops to the full, and thus they are prepared. In this way, they have no rival in the 4 seas, and by order prevailing, products are accumulated. By the accumulation of products, it is possible for the rewards to be big. If rewards are uniform, rank will be honored. If rank is honored, rewards will bring profit. Therefore, as it said, the army being based on a state of order, there is a marvelous result. Custom being based on law, 10,000 changes of circumstances are brought about. A condition of supremacy, being based upon the mind, it is outwardly manifested in a condition of preparedness. If these 3 points of view are all taken into consideration, the result will be that the strong may be firmly established. Thus orderly government is the necessary result of strength, and strength again of orderly government of riches, and riches again of orderly government, riches of strength, and strength again of riches. Therefore, as it said, the way to orderly government and strength is to discuss fundamentals. Chapter 12. Military Defense. A state that has to fight on 4 fronts values defense and a state that rests against the sea values attack. For if a state that fights on four fronts is fond of raising soldiers, it will be in a dangerous position, as it has to resist four neighbors. As soon as a country with four neighbors begins hostilities, four countries mobilize armies. Therefore is it said that the country is in a dangerous position. If a state that has to fight on four fronts is unable to raise, from a city of 10,000 houses, an army of more than 10,000 men, then the state will be in a dangerous position. Therefore is it said, a state that has to fight on four fronts should concern itself with defensive warfare. In defending walled cities, the best way is, with the strength of the worn-out men, to fight the fresh strength of the invaders. It is assaults upon walled cities that wear out the strength of men. So long as the walled cities have not all been razed, the invaders have no means of penetrating the country. This is meant by the saying that the strength of worn-out men should fight the fresh strength of the invading force. But when the walled cities have all been razed, and the foreign army thus finds the means of penetrating, then certainly it will be exhausted, and the people within the country will be rested. Fighting with rested strength against those of exhausted strength is said to be fighting with the strength of fresh men against the worn-out strength of the invading forces. All these are called the misfortunes attendant upon the besieging of walled cities. It is regarded as a misfortune that always, in capturing cities, the strength of the army is worn out. In these three things misfortune is due, not to insufficient effort, but to mistaken generalship. The way to hold a city is to have abundant strength. Therefore, as it said, when the invading force musters its levies, mobilize as many as 3 armies, and divide them according to the number of the chariots of the invading force. Of these 3 armies, one should be formed of able-bodied men, one of able-bodied women, and one of the old and feeble men and women. These are called the 3 armies. Cause the army of able-bodied men, with abundant provisions and sharp weapons, to marshal themselves and to await the enemy. Cause the able-bodied women, with abundant provisions and ramparts at their backs, to marshal themselves and to await orders, so as to make at the approach of the invaders earthworks as an obstruction, and traps, chevaux de frise, and pitfalls, to pull down the supporting beams and to tear down the houses, to transport what is transportable, and to burn what is untransportable, so that the invaders are not able to make use thereof in their attack. Cause the army of the old and feeble to guard the oxen, horses, sheep, and swine, and to collect all that is consumable of plants and water, to feed them therewith, so as to obtain food for the able-bodied men and women. But see to it carefully that the 3 armies do not intermingle. If the able-bodied men mingle with the army of the able-bodied women, they will attach great value to the safety of the women, and wicked people will have opportunities for intrigue, with the result that the state will perish. Taking pleasure in the women's company, the men will be afraid of disturbing reports, and so not even the brave will fight. If the able-bodied men and women intermingle with the army of the old and feeble, then the old will arouse the compassion of the able-bodied, and the feeble the pity of the strong. Compassion and pity in the heart cause brave people to be more anxious and fearful people not to fight. Therefore, as it said, see to it carefully that the 3 armies do not intermingle. This is the way to have abundant strength. Chapter 13. Making orders strict. If orders are made strict, orderly government is not delayed, and if laws are equable, officials are not wicked. Once the law is fixed, one should not damage it with virtuous words. If men of merit are appointed to office, people will have little to say. But if men of virtue are appointed to office, people will have much to say. The practice of good government begins with making judgments. Where 5 hamlets are the unit for judgments, supremacy is attained. Where 10 hamlets are the unit for judgments, there is merely strength. He who procrastinates in creating order will be dismembered. govern by punishments and wage war by rewards, seek transgressors, and do not seek the virtuous. Therefore, if the law is fixed and not altered, then. This part of the text is lost. The next extant part starts as, if in the country there are no wicked people, there is no wicked trade in the capital. If affairs are many and secondary things are numerous, if agriculture is relaxed and criminals gain the upper hand, then the country will certainly be dismembered. If the people have a surplus of grain, cause them to obtain office and rank by means of their cereals. If through their own efforts they can count upon obtaining office and rank, farmers will not be lazy. If a tube of no more than 4 inches has no bottom, it can certainly not be filled. To confer office, to give rank, and to grant salaries, without regard to merit, is like having no bottom. If a state, when poor, applies itself to war, the poison will originate on the enemy's side, and it will not have the 6 parasites, but will certainly be strong. If a state, when rich, does not apply itself to war, the poison is transferred to its own interior, and it will have the 6 kinds of parasites, and will certainly be weak. If the state confers office and gives rank according to merit, it may be said to be planning with complete wisdom and fighting with complete courage. Such a country will certainly have no equal. If a state confers office and gives rank according to merit, then government measures will be simple and words will be few. This may be said to be abolishing laws by means of the law and abolishing words by means of words. But if a state confers office and gives rank according to the 6 parasites, then government measures will be complicated and words will arise. This may be said to be bringing about laws by means of the law and causing volubility by means of words. Then the prince will devote himself to talking. Officials will be distracted with ruling the wicked. Wicked officials will gain their own way, and those who have merit will retire more daily. This may be said to be failure. When one has to observe 10 rules, there is confusion. When one has only 1 to observe, there is order. When the law is fixed, then those who are fond of practicing the 6 parasites perish. If people occupy themselves entirely with agriculture, the state is rich. If the 6 parasites are not practiced, then soldiers and people will, without exception, vie with one another and will be glad to be employed by their ruler. The people within the borders will vie with one another to regard it as glorious, and none will regard it as disgraceful. Following upon this comes the condition where people will do it because they are encouraged by means of rewards and restrained by means of punishment. But the worst case is when people hate it, are anxious about it, and are ashamed of it. Then they adorn their outer appearances and are engaged in talking. They are ashamed of taking a position and exalt culture. In this way they shun agriculture and war, and outside interests being thus furnished, it will be a perilous position for the country. To have people dying of hunger and cold, and to have unwillingness to fight for the sake of profit and emolument, are usual occurrences in a perishing state. The 6 parasites are rites and music, odes and history, moral culture and virtue, filial piety and brotherly love, sincerity and faith, chastity and integrity, benevolence and righteousness, criticism of the army and being ashamed of fighting. If there are these 12 things, the ruler is unable to make people farm and fight, and then the state will be so poor that it will be dismembered. If these 12 things come together, then it may be said that the prince's administration is not stronger than his ministers, and that the administration of his officials is not stronger than his people. This is said to be a condition where the 6 parasites are stronger than the government. When these 12 gain an attachment, then dismemberment ensues. Therefore, to make a country prosperous, these 12 things should not be practiced. Then the state will have much strength, and no one in the empire will be able to invade it. When its soldiers march out, they will capture their objective, and having captured it, will be able to hold it. When it keeps its soldiers in reserve and does not attack, it will certainly become rich. The court officials do not reject any merits, however few they may be, nor do they detract from any merits, however many they may be. Office and rank are obtained according to the acquired merit, and even though there may be sophistical talk, it will be impossible thereby to obtain undue precedence. This is said to be government by statistics. In attacking with force, 10 points are gained for every 1 point undertaken, but in attacking with words, 100 are lost for every one marched out. If a state loves force, it is said to attack with what is difficult. If a state loves words, it is said to attack with what is easy. If penalties are heavy and rewards few, then the ruler loves his people and they will die for him. If rewards are heavy and penalties light, then the ruler does not love his people, nor will they die for him. If the profit disappears through one outlet only, the state will have no equal. If it disappear through 2 outlets, the state will have only half the profit. But if the profit disappears through 10 outlets, the state will not be preserved. If heavy penalties are clear, there will be great control, but if they are not clear, there will be the 6 parasites. If the 6 kinds of parasites come together, then the people are not fit for employment. Therefore, in a prosperous country, when punishments are applied, the people will be closely associated with the ruler, and when rewards are applied, they will reap profit. In applying punishments, light offenses should be punished heavily. If light offenses do not appear, heavy punishments will not come. This is said to be abolishing penalties by means of penalties, and if penalties are abolished, affairs will succeed. If crimes are serious and penalties light, penalties will appear and trouble will arise. This is said to be bringing about penalties by means of penalties, and such a state will surely be dismembered. A sage prince understands what is essential in affairs, and therefore in his administration of the people, there is that which is most essential. For the fact that uniformity in the manipulating of rewards and punishments supports moral virtue is connected with human psychology. A sage prince, by his ruling of men, is certain to win their hearts. Consequently, he is able to use force. Force produces strength, strength produces prestige, prestige produces virtue, and so virtue has its origin in force, which a sage prince alone possesses, and therefore he is able to transmit benevolence and righteousness to the empire. Chapter 14. Cultivation of the right standard. Orderly government is brought about in a state by 3 things. The first is law, the second good faith, and the third right standards. Law is exercised in common by the prince and his ministers. Good faith is established in common by the prince and his ministers. The right standard is fixed by the prince alone. If a ruler of men fails to observe it, there is danger. If prince and ministers neglect the law and act according to their own self-interest, disorder is the inevitable result. Therefore, if law is established, rights and duties are made clear, and self-interest does not harm the law, then there is orderly government. If the fixing of the right standard is decided by the prince alone, there is prestige. If the people have faith in his rewards, then their activities will achieve results, and if they have faith in his penalties, then wickedness will have no starting point. Only an intelligent ruler loves right standards and values good faith, and will not, for the sake of self-interest, harm the law. For if he speaks many liberal words but cuts down his rewards, then his subjects will not be of service. And if he issues one severe order after another, but does not apply the penalties, people will despise the death penalty. In general, rewards are a civil measure and penalties a military. Civil and military measures are the summary of the law. Therefore, an intelligent ruler places reliance on the law. An intelligent ruler, if things are not kept hidden from him, is called intelligent, and if he is not deceived, is called perspicacious. Therefore, he benefits by giving liberal rewards, and by making penalties severe, he ensures that he is feared. He does not neglect those that are distant, nor does he run counter to those that are near. Thus ministers will not hide things from their ruler, nor will inferiors deceive their superiors. Those who are engaged in governing in the world chiefly dismiss the law and place reliance on private appraisal, and this is what brings disorder in a state. The early kings hung up scales with standard weights and fixed the length of feet and inches, and to the present day these are followed as models because their divisions were clear. Now dismissing standard scales and yet deciding weight, or abolishing feet and inches and yet forming an opinion about length, even an intelligent merchant would not apply this system because it would lack definiteness. Now, if the back is turned on models and measures and reliance is placed on private appraisal, in all those cases there would be a lack of definiteness. Only a Yao would be able to judge knowledge and ability, worth or unworth without a model. But the world does not consist exclusively of Yaos. Therefore, the ancient kings understood that no reliance should be placed on individual opinions or biased approval, so they set up models and made the distinctions clear. Those who fulfilled the standard were rewarded, those who harmed the public interest were punished. The standards for rewards and punishments were not wrong in their appraisals, and therefore people did not dispute them. But if the bestowal of office and the granting of rank are not carried out according to the labor born, then loyal ministers have no advancement. And if in awarding rewards and giving emoluments the respective merits are not weighed, then fighting soldiers will not enter his service. Generally, the principle on which ministers serve their prince are dependent, in most cases, on what the ruler likes. If the ruler likes law, then the ministers will make law their principle in serving. If the prince likes words, then the ministers will make words their principle in serving. If the prince likes law, then upright scholars will come to the front. But if he likes words, then ministers full of praise for some and blame for others will be at his side. If public and private interests are clearly distinguished, then even small-minded men do not hate men of worth, nor do worthless men envy those of merit. For when Yao and Shun established their rule over the empire, they did not keep the benefits of the empire for themselves, but it was for the sake of the empire that they established their rule. In making the imperial succession dependent on worth and ability, they did not intend to alienate fathers and sons from one another, and to conciliate distant people, but they did it because they had a true insight into the ways of order and disorder. So too, the three kings conciliated people by righteousness, and the 5 lords protector rectified the feudal lords by law. That is, in all these cases, none took for himself the benefits of the empire. They ruled for the sake of the empire, and thus, when those who held positions had corresponding merit, the empire enjoyed their administration, and no one could harm it. But nowadays, princes and ministers of a disorderly world each, on a small scale, appropriates the profits of his own state, and each exercises the burden of his own office for his private benefit. This is why the states are in a perilous position. For the relation between public and private interests is what determines existence or ruin. However, if models and measures are abolished and private appraisal is favored, then bad ministers will let their standards be influenced by money in order to obtain emoluments, and officials of the various ranks will, in a stealthy and hidden manner, make extortions from the people. The saying runs, "Many woodworms and the wood snaps, a large fissure and the wall collapses." So if ministers of state vie with one another in selfishness and do not heed the people, then inferiors are estranged from superiors. When this happens, there is a fissure in the state. If the officials of the various ranks make extortions from the people, stealthily and in a hidden manner, they are for the people like woodworms. Therefore is it exceptional in the world that where there are fissures and woodworms, ruin does not follow. That is why intelligent kings placed reliance on the law and removed self-interest, so that the state should have no fishers and no woodworms. Chapter 15. Encouragement of Immigration. In a territory of 100 square li, a tenth should be occupied by mountains and hills, a tenth by glades and morasses, a tenth by valleys, dales, and running water, a tenth by cities, towns, and highways, a tenth by barren fields, and 4/10 by fertile fields. In this way, 50,000 workmen can be fed. Those mountains and hills, glades and morasses, valleys and dales are able to provide the required material, and the cities, towns, and highways are sufficient to accommodate the people concerned. This was the proportion according to which the early kings regulated the land and divided the people. Now, the territory of Qin comprises 5 times 1,000 square li, but the soil fit for growing corn cannot occupy more than 2/5. The area of the fields does not come up to 1,000,000 mu, and the produce and treasures of its glades and morasses, of its valleys and dales, and of its famous mountains and big rivers are also incompletely utilized. This means that the population is ill-proportioned to the territory. The neighbors of Qin are the 3 Jin states, and of these Han and Wei are fond of employing soldiers. Their territory is narrow, but their population is numerous. Their dwellings are built higgledy-piggledy, and they live close together. Their grain production is small, and merchants charge interest. The people on the one hand do not have their names registered, and on the other hand have no fields or houses, so that for subsistence they rely on evil occupations and pursuits of minor importance, with the result that those who are exempt from taxation because they live in steep and inaccessible places, in morasses and by streams, are more than 1/2 of the population. Therefore, it would appear that a condition where the territory is not sufficient to support the population is still worse than that whereas in the case of Qin, the population is insufficient to fill the territory. In reflecting upon the nature of the people, what they desire are fields and houses. Now, whereas it is probable that these are what Jin does not have, it is beyond doubt that Qin has them in surplus. If, this being so, people do not, nevertheless, come west, it is because the soldiers of Qin are in sad plight, and the people suffer hardships. I venture to think that the intelligence of your Majesty's officials takes a mistaken view. That is, the reason why we remain weak and do not succeed in enticing the people of the 3 Jin states is that we are sparing in granting titles and regard the exemption from taxes as a serious matter. They argue as follows. The 3 Jin states are weak because their people are concerned with pleasure and because exemptions and rank are treated lightly. Qin, on the other hand, is strong because its people are concerned with hard work, and exemptions and the conferment of rank are treated seriously. Should we now confer many titles and grant exemptions from taxation for long periods, then we should be letting go of the principle by which Qin has become strong, and should be doing exactly that which has made the Jin states weak. This is the argument that causes your Majesty's officials to regard the conferring of titles as a serious matter, and to be sparing in the granting of exemptions from taxation. I venture, however, to think that this is wrong. The object in causing the people hardship and in strengthening the army is to attack the enemy and to realize one's desires. The art of war says, if the enemy is weak, the army is strong. This expression means that one does not fail in attack, but the enemy fails in defense. Now for 4 generations the Jin states have gained no victory over Qin. Since the time of King Xiang of Wei, the times that the 3 Jin states have been defeated by Qin, in small or big battles, in open battle or in storming defended cities, have been innumerable. The reason that in spite of this they do not submit to Qin is that Qin has been able to conquer their territory, but unable to captivate their people. Now, if your majesty will issue a favorable proclamation to the effect that those soldiers of the various feudal lords who will come and submit will be granted exemption for 3 generations without hearing anything of military affairs, and that those who live within the 4 boundaries of Qin, in the mountains and on the slopes, on hills and in marshes, will not be called upon for 10 years for military service. And if this is made clear in the law, it will be possible to create 1 million workers. I have said before, in reflecting upon the nature of the people, what they desire are fields and houses. Now, whereas it is probable that Jin does not have these, it is certain that Qin has them in surplus. If in spite of this the people do not migrate westward, it is because the soldiers of Qin are in sore plight, and the people suffer hardships. Now, if they are benefited with land and houses, an exemption from taxes for 3 generations is granted them. That is, if a point is made of giving them what they desire and of not causing them to perform what they dislike, then all the people from east of the mountains will migrate westward. Moreover, to state the case frankly, if you do not act thus, you may fill the empty and waste lands and produce natural wealth, so that 1 million people are engaged in the fundamental occupation, and the benefits will be manifold. But how will you prevent the soldiers from failing in their attacks? Indeed, the trouble with Qin is, on the one hand, that if it raises soldiers and wages war, the country is poor, and on the other hand, if it remains quiet and farms, the enemy obtains respite. Your Majesty cannot combine success in these 2 fields. So although for 3 generations it has waged successful wars, yet it has not subjected the empire. Now, if the old population of Qin are engaged in warfare, and if the newcomers are caused to occupy themselves with agriculture, then even though the army may stay 100 days outside the frontier, within the borders, not a moment will be lost for agriculture. Thus you may be successful both in enriching and in becoming strong. When I speak of soldiers, I do not mean that all should be raised and mobilized to the last man, but according to the number of armies, soldiers, chariots, and cavalry that can be furnished within the territory, cause the old population of Qin to serve as soldiers, and the new people to provide fodder and food. Should there be a state in the empire that does not submit, then your Majesty should, herewith, in spring, prevent their farming, in summer live on their produce, in autumn lay hold of their harvest, and in winter pickle their vegetables. By the methods of the great warfare, shake their fundamental means of existence, and by those of the extensive culture pacify their descendants. If your Majesty follows this policy, then within 10 years the various feudal lords will have no people from other countries, and wherefore, then, should your Majesty be sparing in the conferment of titles or regard exemption from taxes as a serious matter. At the victories in the Zhao and in the Hua battles, Qin extended its territory eastwards by cutting off heads, but it is clear that there was no advantage in this eastward extension. And yet officials regard these events as great accomplishments because loss was inflicted on the enemy. Now, if the people of the 3 Jin states are induced to immigrate by means of grasslands and cottages, and if they are made to occupy themselves with primary things, then this way of inflicting damage on the enemy is just as real as a victory in war, and Qin will have the advantage of obtaining agricultural products. Conversely, by this plan, 2 birds will be hit with 1 stone. Further, in the victories in the Zhou and Hua battles, or in that at Changping, how many people did Qin lose, and how many soldiers, both of the people and of the foreign inhabitants, were unable to occupy themselves with primary affairs? I venture to think that they were innumerable. Suppose amongst your Majesty's ministers there should be 1 able, with a half of these losses, to weaken Jin and to strengthen Qin as much as by the victories in these 3 battles, then would your Majesty, no doubt, grant him big rewards. Now, by the method which I propose, the people would not have a single day's scutage, nor would the officials have the expense of great sums of money, while Jin would be weakened and Qin strengthened more than by 3 battles. But if your majesty still does not approve, then your servant is too stupid to understand it. Amongst the citizens of Qi was one Dong Go Chang, who had very many desires and wished to have 10,000 pieces of gold. When his retainer begged for a monetary subsidy in case he would obtain that money, he would not give it, saying, "I want to use it to obtain a fief." His retainer became angry and left him and went to Song, saying, "This is being stingy about what he has not. Therefore, he is now in a worse position than when he first had me with him." Now Jin has the people, and Qin is sparing in the granting of exemptions from taxes. This is being stingy about what one has not, with the result that one loses what one might have. Is this not just like Dong Go Chang's being stingy about what he did not have, and so losing his retainer? Moreover, in antiquity, there were Yao and Shun, who in their lifetime were praised. In the Middle Ages there were Tang and Wu, during whose reigns people submitted. These are the 3 kings, who are praised by 10,000 generations, and are regarded as sage kings. Yet their methods cannot be applied in later times. Should you now make exemptions from taxation for 3 generations, you would be able completely to subject the 3 Jin states. This is not, like the virtuous kings, merely establishing the present times. This part of the text is lost. The next extant part starts as, "but effecting that later generations shall be at the service of the king." This, however, does not mean that I do not welcome a sage, but it is difficult to await a sage. Chapter 16. Compendium of Penalties. This chapter of the Book of Lord Shang is lost. Chapter 17. Rewards and Punishments. The way in which a sage administers a state is by unifying rewards, unifying punishments, and unifying education. The effect of unifying rewards is that the army will have no equal. The effect of unifying punishments is that orders will be carried out. The effect of unifying education is that inferiors will obey superiors. Now, if one understands rewards, there should be no expense. If one understands punishments, there should be no death penalty. If one understands education, there should be no changes, and so people would know the business of the people, and there would be no divergent customs. The climax in the understanding of rewards is to bring about a condition of having no rewards. The climax in the understanding of punishments is to bring about a condition of having no punishments. The climax in the understanding of education is to bring about a condition of having no education. What I mean by the unifying of rewards is that profits and emoluments, office and rank, should be determined exclusively by military merit, and that there should not be different reasons for distributing them. For thus the intelligent and the stupid, the noble and the humble, the brave and the timorous, the virtuous and the worthless, will all apply to the full whatever knowledge they may have in their breasts, exert to the uttermost whatever strength they may have in their limbs, and will be at the service of their ruler even to death. And the outstanding heroes, the virtuous and the good, of the whole empire will follow him like flowing water, with the result that the army will have no equal, and commands will be carried out throughout the whole empire. A country of 10,000 chariots will not dare to assemble its soldiers in the plains of the Middle Kingdom, nor will a country of 1,000 chariots dare to defend a walled city. Should a country of 10,000 chariots assemble its soldiers in the plains of the Middle Kingdom, one would in battle rout its army. And should a country of 1,000 chariots defend a walled city, one would in the assault capture that town. If, in battles, one always routs the other's army, and in assaults, one always captures the other's towns, with the result that finally one has all the cities, and all their riches accrue, then what expense or loss can one suffer, even though there are rich congratulatory rewards? In days of old, Tang was invested with Zan Mao, Wen Wang was invested with Qi Zhou, a district of 100 square li, Tang fought a battle with Jie in the fields of Mingqiao. Wuwang fought a battle with Zhou in the fields of Mu, and utterly defeated the 9 armies, and finally split up the land and gave fiefs to the feudal lords. The officers and soldiers, who retired from the ranks, all received land, with the peasants belonging to it, in hamlets of 25 families. The chariots were given a rest, and were no longer mounted. The horses were set at liberty on the southern slopes of Mount Hua. The oxen were set at liberty in the meadows, and they were allowed to grow old without being reassembled for war. This was the way of Tang and Wu of giving rewards. Therefore is it said, if all the people in the empire had had to be rewarded with the produce of Zanmao and Qizhou, no one would have received a pint, and if all the people of the empire had had to be rewarded with its money, no one would have received a cash. Therefore is it said, if a prince of a territory of 100 li invests his ministers with fiefs, he greatly increases his original territory. How is it that the rewards received, beginning with those to officers and soldiers retired from the ranks, which consisted of land, with the peasants belonging to it, in hamlets of 25 families, were even more liberal than those to horses and oxen? Because those kings knew well how to reward the people of the empire according to the possessions of the empire. Therefore do I say, if one understands rewards, there is no expense. Since Tang and Wu destroyed Jie and Zhou, no harm was done within the 4 seas, and the empire enjoyed great stability. The 5 storehouses were constructed, the 5 weapons were stored away, military affairs were set aside, culture and education were practiced, shields and spears were carried reversed, writing tablets were stuck in the girdle, and music was performed in order to manifest one's virtue. Such a condition of affairs prevailed in those times. Rewards and emoluments were not bestowed, and yet the people were orderly. Therefore I say, the climax in the understanding of rewards is to bring about a condition where there are no longer rewards. What I mean by the unification of punishments is that punishments should know no degree or grade, but that from ministers of state and generals down to great officers and ordinary folk, whosoever does not obey the king's commands, violates the interdicts of the state, or rebels against the statutes fixed by the ruler, should be guilty of death and should not be pardoned. Merit acquired in the past should not cause a decrease in the punishment for demerit later, nor should good behavior in the past cause any derogation of the law for wrong done later. If loyal ministers and filial sons do wrong, they should be judged according to the full measure of their guilt, and if amongst the officials who have to maintain the law and to uphold an office, there are those who do not carry out the king's law, they are guilty of death and should not be pardoned, but their punishment should be extended to their family for 3 generations. Colleagues who, knowing their offense, inform their superiors will themselves escape punishment. In neither high nor low offices should there be an automatic hereditary succession to the office, rank, lands, or emoluments of officials. Therefore do I say that if there are severe penalties that extend to the whole family, people will not dare to try how far they can go, and as they dare not try, no punishments will be necessary. The former kings, in making their interdicts, did not put to death or cut off people's feet or brand people's faces because they sought to harm those people, but with the object of prohibiting wickedness and stopping crime. For there is no better means of prohibiting wickedness and stopping crime than by making punishments heavy. If punishments are heavy and rigorously applied, then people will not dare to try how far they can go, with the result in the state there will be no people punished. Because there are no people punished in the state, I say that if one understands punishments, there is no capital punishment. Duke Wen of Jin wished to make clear the system of punishments in order to gain the affection of the people. Thereupon, he assembled together all the feudal lords and great officers in the Xiqian palace. But Dian Xie arrived too late and asked for punishment. The prince said, "Employ stabbing," and the lictors thereupon cut through Dian Xie's spine and made him die an expiatory death. The scholars of the state of Jin, having investigated the matter, were all afraid and said, "Considering that Dian Xie was a favorite and still he has been sawn through as an expiatory death, how will it fare with us?" He raised an army and attacked Cao and Wulu. He also overturned the lowlands of Zheng and veered towards the east the fields of Wei. He conquered the people of Jing at Chengpu. The soldiers of his 3 armies were so disciplined that stopping them was as if their feet were cut off, and in marching they were like flowing water, and none of the soldiers of the 3 armies dared to transgress his prohibitions. So by basing himself on this one affair of Dian Xie, where a light offense was severely punished, Duke Wen caused the state of Jin to enjoy order. Formerly Dan, Duke of Zhou, killed his younger brother Quan and banished his younger brother Huo, saying, "They have transgressed against the interdicts." The multitudes in the empire all said, "If, when the ruler's own brothers commit a fault, he does not deviate from the law, how will it fare then with those who are distant and far off?" Therefore, the empire knew that sword and saw were applied to members of the court of Zhou, and consequently all within the seas enjoyed order. Therefore do I say, the climax in the understanding of punishments is to bring about a condition where there are no longer punishments. What I mean by the unification of education is that all those partisans of wide scholarship, sophistry, cleverness, good faith, integrity, rights and music, and moral culture, whether their reputations are unsullied or foul, should for these reasons not become rich or honored, should not discuss punishments, and should not compose their private views independently and memorialize their superiors. The strong should be broken and the sharp be blunted. Although one may be called a sage or wise or clever or eloquent or liberal or simple, yet one must not, if one lacks merit, monopolize the ruler's favors, but the gate to riches and honor should lie in war and in nothing else. Those who are capable in war tread through the gate to riches and honor, but for the violent and self-willed there are inflexible punishments and no pardon. Thus fathers and seniors, elder and younger brothers, acquaintances, relatives by marriage, husband and wife, one and all say that that to which they devote special application is war, and that alone. Therefore indeed the strong devote themselves to warfare, the old and feeble devote themselves to defense. For those who die there is no regret, and the living are bent on exerting themselves. This is what I mean by unifying education. The desire of people for riches and honor does not generally cease before their coffins are closed, and when the gate to riches and honor has its approach in soldiering, then when people hear of war they congratulate each other, and whether at work or at rest, at times of drinking or eating, they will sing songs of war. This is what I mean by saying that the climax in the understanding of education is to bring about a condition where there is no longer education. This is what I mean by the 3 teachings. A sage cannot have a universal knowledge of the needs of 10,000 beings. Therefore, in his administration of a state, he selects what is important for dealing with the 10,000 beings. So there is little instruction, but much successful effort. The way in which a sage governs a state is easy to know, but difficult to practice. Therefore, that sages need not be increased, commonplace rulers need not be abolished, that the killing of men is no violence, and the rewarding of men no benevolence, follow from the fact that the law is clear. The sage confers office and grants rank according to merit. Therefore men of talent are not anxious. The sage is not indulgent with transgressions and does not pardon crimes, and so villainy does not spring up. The sage in administering a state investigates the possibilities of uniform alone, and that alone, Chapter 18, Policies, Of old, in the times of the great and illustrious ruler, people found their livelihood by cutting trees and slaying animals. The population was sparse, and trees and animals numerous. In the times of Huangdi, neither young animals nor eggs were taken. The officials had no provisions, and when the people died, they were not allowed to use outer coffins. These measures were not the same, but that they both attained supremacy was due to the fact that the times in which they lived were different. In the times of Shang Yang, men plowed to obtain food, and women wove to obtain clothing. Without the application of punishments or governmental measures, order prevailed. Without the raising of mailed soldiers, he reigned supreme. After Shang Yang had died, the weak were conquered by force and the few oppressed by the many. Therefore Huangdi created the ideas of prince and minister, of superior and inferior, the rights between father and son, between elder and younger brothers, the union between husband and wife, and between consort and mate. At home, he applied sword and saw, and abroad he used mailed soldiers. This was because the times had changed. Looking at it from this point of view, Shang Yang is not higher than Huangdi, but the reason that his name was honored was because he suited his time. Therefore, if by war one wishes to abolish war, even war is permissible. If by killing one wants to abolish killing, even killing is permissible. If by punishments one wishes to abolish punishments, even heavy punishments are permissible. Of old, the one who could regulate the empire was he who regarded as his first task the regulating of his own people. The one who could conquer a strong enemy was he who regarded as his first task the conquering of his own people. For the way in which the conquering of the people is based upon the regulating of the people is like the effect of smelting in regard to metal or the work of the potter in regard to clay. If the basis is not solid, then people are like flying birds or like animals. Who can regulate these? The basis of the people is the law. Therefore, a good ruler obstructed the people by means of the law, and so his reputation and his territory flourished. What is the cause of one's reputation becoming respected and one's territory wide, so that one attains sovereignty? It is because one conquers in war. What is the cause of one's reputation becoming debased and one's territory diminished, so that one comes to ruin? It is because one is worn out by war. From antiquity to the present time, it has never happened that one attained supremacy without conquest, or that one came to ruin without defeat. If the people are brave, one conquers in war, but if they are not brave, one is defeated in war. If one can unify the people for war, they are brave, but if one cannot unify the people for war, they are not brave. A sage king obtains the kingship through the efforts of his soldiers. Therefore, he rouses the country and charges it with the obligation of military service. If one enters a state and sees its administration, it is strong if its people are of use. How does one know that the people are of use? If they, on perceiving war, behave like hungry wolves on seeing meat, then they are of use. Generally, war is a thing that people hate. He who succeeds in making people delight in war attains supremacy. With the people of a strong state, the father, in making a parting bequest to his son, the elder brother to his younger brother, the wife to her husband, all say, "Do not return unless you win." And further they say, "If you incur death by failing in obedience to the law, or by transgressing orders, we too shall die." If in the villages they are governed in an orderly manner, then deserters from the ranks will have no resort, and stragglers will have nowhere to go. By the order in the ranks, they should be organized into bands of 5. They should be distinguished by badges and controlled by mandates, so that there would be no place for bungling and no danger that exhaustion would arise. Thus the multitudes of the 3 armies obeyed the mandates like running water, and in danger of death they did not turn on their heels. If a state is in disorder, it is not because the law is disorderly, but because its law is not applied. All states have laws, but there are no laws that guarantee that the laws are practiced. All states have laws that prohibit crime and wickedness, and that punish thieves and robbers, but there are no laws that guarantee that criminals and wicked people, thieves and robbers, are caught. If those who commit crimes and wickedness, theft and robbery are punished with death, and if, in spite of this, crime and wickedness, theft and robbery do not cease, then it is because they are not always caught. If they are always caught, and if, in spite of this, there still remain criminals, wicked people, thieves and robbers, then it is because punishments are too light. If punishments are light, one cannot exterminate them. But if they are always caught, then those who are punished will be numerous. Therefore, a good ruler punishes the bad people, but does not reward the virtuous ones. So, without being punished, the people will be virtuous, and the reason of this is that punishments are heavy. When punishments are heavy, people dare not transgress, and therefore there will be no punishments, because none of the people will dare to do wrong. Everyone in the whole country will be virtuous, so that without rewarding the virtuous, the people will be virtuous. That the rewarding of the virtuous is not permissible is because it is like giving rewards for not stealing. Therefore, a good ruler succeeds in making a man like Xi trustworthy. How much more, then, a man like Bo Yi? An incapable ruler makes a man like Bo Yi mistrustful. How much more a man like Xi? If conditions are such that one cannot commit crimes, then even a man like Xi will be trustworthy. But if conditions are such that it is possible to commit crimes, then even a man like Bo Yi will be mistrustful. A state either encourages orderly government or it encourages disorder. If an intelligent ruler is on top, then those whom he appoints will be men of talent, and thus the law will be adhered to by the people of talent. If the law is adhered to by people of talent, then there will be law amongst those below, and the worthless will not dare to commit crimes. This is what I call encouraging orderly government. But if an unintelligent ruler is on top, then those whom he appoints will certainly be worthless men, so that there will be no clear law in the state, and worthless people will dare to commit crimes. This is what I call encouraging disorder. An army either encourages strength or it encourages weakness. If the people desire naturally to fight and are not left without fighting, it is called encouraging strength. But if the people naturally do not desire to fight and are left without fighting, it is called encouraging weakness. An intelligent ruler does not enrich and honor his ministers in an arbitrary manner. What I mean by riches are not grain, rice, pearls, or jade, and what I mean by honor are not rank, position, office, or appointments, but I mean the riches and honor of rank and emoluments acquired by actions contrary to the law, and which are prompted by selfish interest. Generally, a ruler of men does not, in virtuous conduct, exceed other men, nor does he do so in knowledge, nor does he surpass others in courage or strength. Yet the people, though they may have sages and wise men, they dare not plot against him. Though they may have courage, dare not kill him. Though they are numerous, they dare not overrule their lord. Though the people may reach a number of many tens of thousands, if heavy rewards are set before them, they dare not contest for them. If penalties are applied, they dare not resent them. The reason is that there is law. If a state is in disorder, it is because the people often have private opinions of what is their duty. If an army is weak, it is because people often have private shows of bravery, and as a result, there will be dismemberment. If the roads to the acquirement of titles and emoluments are many, ruin will ensue. In a country where the desire is to cheapen rank and to make light of emoluments, officials draw their salaries without activity. Men have fame without acquiring it in war. People have respect without having the rank that entitles them to it, are rich without having emoluments, and are leaders without having office. Such are said to be a wicked people. He who is called a virtuous ruler has no loyal ministers, and a compassionate father has no filial sons. If it is desired to do away with clever talkers, then all should control one another by means of the law and should correct one another by means of mandates. Being unable to do wrong alone, one will not do wrong in the company of others. What is called wealth is to have receipts large and expenditure small. When there is moderation in dress and frugality in food and drink, then expenditure is small. When women within and men outside fulfill their duties completely, then receipts are large. What is called intelligence is for nothing to escape the sight, so that the multitude of officials dare not commit crimes, nor the people dare to do wrong. Thus the ruler of men will repose on a rest couch and listen to the sound of stringed and bamboo instruments, and yet the empire will enjoy order. In other words, what is called intelligence is to cause the masses to have no possibility of not working. What is called strength is to conquer the empire. By conquering the empire, all the forces are united, and as a result the brave and strong will not dare to commit any violence, nor will sages and wise men dare to deceive or to be employed on empty grounds. When the multitudes of the empire are united, none will dare not to do what he the ruler likes, but all will avoid what he dislikes. In other words, what is called strength is to cause all bravery and force to have no possibility of being used except for the prince's own advantage. If the prince's will is effective, the empire will benefit by it. If it is ineffective, the empire will blame him. Whoever relies on the empire is rejected by the empire. Whoever relies on himself gains the empire. The one who gains the empire is he who regards it as his first duty to gain himself. The one who succeeds in conquering a strong enemy is he who regards it as his first duty to conquer himself. A sage knows the right principles which must be followed and the right time and circumstances for action. Therefore the rule which he exercises always leads to order. The people whom he employs in war are always brave, and the commands which he issues are always obeyed. In consequence, when his army marches out, it has no equal, and when his commands are issued, the whole empire submits. A yellow crane flies 1,000 li at one stretch, because it is supplied with those qualities which make it fit for flying. The chi lin and the lure cover 1,000 li a day, because they are supplied with the power needed for running. Tigers, leopards, bears, and yellow bears are unmatched in fierce fighting, because they have the nature fitted for conquest. A sage views the fundamental elements of government and knows the principle which must be followed. Therefore, his way of directing the people is like directing water from a high to a low place, or like directing fire towards dry things and away from wet ones. Therefore is it said, "The benevolent may be benevolent towards others, but cannot cause others to be benevolent. The righteous may love others, but cannot cause others to love." From this I know that benevolence and righteousness are not sufficient for governing the empire. A sage has a nature that insists on good faith, and he also has a law method by which he compels the whole empire to have good faith. What is called righteousness is when ministers are loyal, sons filial, when there are proper ceremonies between juniors and seniors, and distinctions between men and women, when a hungry man eats and a dying man lives, not improperly, but only in accordance with righteousness. This, however, is the constant condition when there is law. A sage king does not value righteousness, but he values the law. If with the law one sees to it that it is clear, and with commands that they are carried out, then it will be all right. Chapter 19, Within the Borders. Within the 4 frontiers, men and women are known by name to their superiors. At birth they are registered, and at death they are erased. Those who have rank ask of those who have no rank to act as bodyguard. For each degree the service of one man is requested. When they have no military service, the bodyguards serve their great officers 6 days in the month. In times of military service, they follow their great officers and are fed by them. The military ranks from the first degree down to the small prefects are called Xiao, Tu, Chao, Shi. The public ranks from the second degree upwards to the degree of Bujang are called military officials, Zhu. In battle, 5 men are organized into a squad. If one of them is killed, the other 4 are beheaded. If a man can capture 1 head, then he is exempted from taxes. For every 5 men is there a corporal, Tun Chang, and for every 100 men a centurion, Chang. If in a battle the centurions and corporals are unsuccessful, they are beheaded. If they are successful, 33 heads or more are accounted ample, and to the centurions and corporals 1 degree in rank is given. An officer of 500 men has 50 swordsmen with short weapons. An officer of twice 500 men, in commanding them, has 100 swordsmen. A prefect with an income of 1,000 pickles of grain has 100 swordsmen. A prefect with an income of 800 pickles of grain has 80 swordsmen. One with 700 pickles has 70 swordsmen. One with 600 pickles has 60 swordsmen. The Guowei has 1,000 swordsmen, and the general has 4,000 swordsmen. If in a battle it comes so far that he is killed, then the swordsmen are beheaded. If a man can capture 1 head, he is exempted from taxes. If in attacking a city or besieging a town they can capture 8,000 heads or more, it is accounted ample. If in a battle in the open field they take 2,000 heads, it is accounted ample. From the Cao officers up to Xiao officers, the great general fully rewards the officers in the ranks. He who was formerly Gongshi is promoted to Shangzao, a Shangzao to Zanniao, a Zanniao to Bujang, a Bujang to great officer, Dafu. When an officer is raised to the rank of a district commander, Xianwei, then he is presented with 6 prisoner slaves and provided with 5,000 soldiers and an income of 600 pickles of grain. Dafu are raised to the rank of Guowei. One who was formerly a Dafu is promoted to Gongdafu, a Gongdafu to Gongsheng, a Gongsheng to Wudafu, and then receives a tax-paying city of 300 families. A former Wudafu is promoted to Shuzhang, a Shuzhang to a Zuokeng, one of the 3 Kengs to a Daliangzao. In all these cases there is presented a town of 300 families, or the taxes of 300 families. Where there is a tax-paying town of 600 families, an office of vice-chancellor is conferred. Those who ride in the company of the great general are all promoted 3 degrees. He who was formerly assistant chancellor, when he is accounted to have the full merit, is promoted to the actual chancellorship. When 3 heads are captured in battle, they are exposed for 3 days. The general confers, in the cases where there is no doubt that it is deserved, the titles of Shi and Dafu in reward. When the heads have been hanging for 3 days and no titles of Shi or Dafu have been conferred on anyone in reward, then they are removed. The 4 Wei of a district are under the critical supervision of a Cheng Wei. If he succeeds in capturing the head of a man of rank, he receives 1 Qing of land and 9 mu of estate, apart from the conferment of 1 degree of rank and a bodyguard for each rank, and he is allowed to enter amongst the military officers. In case of transgression of the law, then those of higher rank criticize those of lower rank and degree. If a man of high rank has been cashiered, he may not be given as servant to a man of rank. Those holding rank from the 2nd degree upwards, in case of an offense, are degraded. Those holding rank not higher than the 1st degree, when guilty of an offense, lose it. At the death of a Xiaofu up to a Dafu, coffins should be of a different kind for each degree, and the number of trees on the graves should be 1 for each degree in rank. In attacking a city or besieging a town, the Minister of Public Works of the state examines critically the size and resources of that city. The Guowei assigns the places, dividing the area according to the number of Tu and Xiao officers for the attack, and he sets them a time limit, saying, "Those who are first will be rewarded as the vanguard, and those who hold back will be reprimanded, as being in the rear, and on a second reprimand will be dismissed. They dig out subterranean passages and pile up fuel. When the fuel has been piled up, they set fire to the beams. From the corps of sappers, on each side of the town, there are 18 men. The soldiers from the corps of sappers, if they know how to fight fiercely, although they cannot capture the heads of any men in the ranks, are rewarded with 1 degree for each man. For every 1 man that is killed, freedom from taxes is given, and for every 1 man that cannot fight to the death, 10 are torn to pieces by chariots. Those who make critical remarks are branded, or their noses are sliced off under the city wall. The Guowei, in assigning their various places to all, cause the several detachments to be followed by Zhangzi. The general erects a wooden platform, wherefrom, together with the chief supervisor of the state and the chief secretary, he watches the battle. Those who enter first are rewarded as men of the vanguard, and those who enter last are treated as men of the rear guard. As to the corps of sappers, the utmost use is made of their few men. If these few men are not sufficient, they are supplemented by those who are anxious to receive a rank. Chapter 20. Weakening the people. A weak people means a strong state, and a strong state means a weak people. Therefore, a country which has the right way is concerned with weakening the people. If they are simple, they become strong, and if they are licentious, they become weak. Being weak, they are law-abiding. Being licentious, they let their ambition go too far. Being weak, they are serviceable. But if they let their ambition go too far, they will become strong. Therefore is it said, to remove the strong by means of a strong people brings weakness. To remove the strong by means of a weak people brings strength. The people, if they are benefited, are harmonious, and if they are loved, they are serviceable. Being serviceable, they receive appointments, and being harmonious, they are not deficient. Receiving appointments, they will enrich themselves in government positions. The ruler will abandon the law and allow things to be done for the benefit of the people. Thus criminals will be numerous. If the people are poor, they will be rich in strength, and being rich in strength, they become licentious. Being licentious, they will suffer from the parasites. Therefore, if the people are rich and unemployed, they should be made to obtain titles by means of their grain, and every one of them will certainly become strong. Then there will be no derogation of agriculture, and the 6 parasites will not sprout out, and thus, the state being rich and the people orderly, there will be twofold strength. An army easily becomes weak, but it is difficult to keep it strong. The people enjoy life and feel happy in leisure, but find it difficult to risk death in dangers. If they find it easy, they will be strong. If there are things that one is ashamed of doing, in the case where there are many crimes and few rewards, there is no loss, and in the case where there are many crimes and the suspicion falls on the enemy, the loss will certainly become gain, and the army will become extremely strong and redoubtable. If there are no things which one is ashamed of doing, it is of advantage to use the army, and if one retains the advantage for a long time, one's position will become assuredly supreme. Therefore, if one's army accomplishes what the enemy dares not accomplish, one becomes strong, and if affairs are undertaken which the enemy is ashamed to perform, one obtains advantage. If there is law, and the people are quiet, changes made by the ruler are relegated to the second place, so that affairs become well organized. The country is interested in maintaining peace and quiet, but a ruler in wielding his authority and privileged position. Thus a ruler values many changes, but the country values few changes. If the profit leaks out through only one outlet, the state will have many products, but if it leaks out through 10 outlets, the state will have few products. If only one outlet is preserved, there will be orderly government, but if 10 outlets are preserved, there will be disorder. Orderly government brings strength, but disorder brings weakness. When there is strength, products are imported, but when there is weakness, products are exported. Therefore, a state that imports products is strong, and one that exports products is weak. If the people live in humiliation, they value rank. If they are weak, they honor office, and if they are poor, they prize rewards. If the people are governed by means of punishments, they enjoy service, and if the people are made to fight by means of rewards, they scorn death. Therefore, if in war one's army is efficient, one is called strong. If the people have private honors, they hold rank cheap and disdain office. If they are rich, they think lightly of rewards. Orderly people are ashamed of humiliations, and if they are made to fight by means of punishments, they will fight. If in fighting people are afraid of death and behave in a disorderly manner, the result will be that soldiers and farmers will be lazy and the country weak. Farming, trade, and office are the three permanent functions in a state. Farmers open up the soil, merchants import products, officials rule the people. These three functions give rise to parasites, 6 in number, which are called care for old age, living on others, beauty, love, ambition, and virtuous conduct. If these 6 parasites find an attachment, there will be dismemberment. If farmers live in affluence, they seek leisure in their old age. If merchants have illicit profits, there will be beauty and love, and these will harm the means for enforcing the law. If officials are set up but are not utilized, ambition and virtuous conduct will be the end. If the 6 parasites become a pervading custom, the army will certainly suffer great defeats. If the law is crooked, order turns into disorder. If reliance is placed on virtue, there is much talking. If government measures are numerous, the state is in disorder. And if there is much talking, the army is weak. But if the law is clear, government measures are limited. If reliance is placed on force, talking ceases. If government measures are limited, the country enjoys orderly administration. And if talking ceases, the army is strong. Therefore, in ruling a great country, it becomes small, and in ruling a small country, it becomes great. If the government takes such measures as the people hate, the people are made weak. And if it takes such measures as the people like, the people are made strong. But a weak people means a strong state, and a strong people means a weak state. If the government takes such measures as the people like, they are made strong, and if strong people are made even stronger, the army becomes doubly weak. But if the government takes such measures as the people hate, they are made weak, and if weak people are made even weaker, the army becomes doubly strong. Therefore, by strengthening the people, one becomes doubly weak and perishes. By weakening the people, one becomes doubly strong and attains supremacy. With a strong people, to attack the strong brings weakness, whereas on the other side strength remains. With a weak people, to attack the strong brings strength, whereas on the other side strength is removed. If strength remains on the other side, one perishes, but if strength is removed on the other side, one attains supremacy. Therefore, with a strong people, to attack the strong brings dismemberment, but with a weak people, to attack the strong brings supremacy. The way in which an intelligent ruler uses his ministers is by always giving them employment for merits which they have acquired, and by always fully recognizing their exertions by rewards. And if a ruler of men makes his people believe in this as firmly as they do in the sun and moon, then he will have no equal. Now Li Lu could see the tip of an autumn's hair, but he could not transfer his sharp vision to others. Wu Huo could lift the weight of 1,000 Jun, but he could not transfer his great strength to others. So sages and men of talent are bound to their personality and nature, which cannot be transferred to others. Now those who administer affairs in our times, all desire to be more than sages. There is much talk of setting the law on high, but they rule in defiance of the law. This is like carrying a heavy load along a far road without having a horse or an ox, or like crossing a wide river without having a boat or oars. Now, to have a numerous population and a strong army is the great capital of an emperor or king. But if he does not have clear laws by which to keep them, he is next door to peril and ruin. Therefore, an intelligent ruler studies the law and thus understands how to bring it about, that the people within his borders have no perverse and depraved hearts, that idly living scholars are pressed into the battle line, and that the 10,000 subjects are alert in plowing and warfare. The people of the state of Chu, who were alert and well-balanced and fast as a whirlwind, were, with their iron lances made of the steel from Yuan, as sharp as a bee's sting. As armor they wore the skin of sharks and the hide of rhinoceros, which are as strong as metal and stone. The Yangtze and the Han rivers were its moats, and the Ru and the Ying its boundaries. The forest of Deng was its screen, and the wall of the Fang Mountains was its frontier. Yet when the army of Qin marched on Yen and Ying, it took those cities as easily as if it had been merely the shaking of a dead tree. Tang Mi met his death at Chuisha. Zhuangqiao rose in the interior, and Chu was divided into 5 parts. This was not because its territory was not large, or that the population was not numerous, or that the armor and weapons and resources were not many, but the reason that in fighting it did not win, and in defending it was unable to hold its own, was due to the fact that it did not have law. Chapter 21. This chapter of the Book of Lord Shang is lost. Chapter 22. External and internal affairs. Of the external affairs of the people, there is nothing more difficult than warfare, so an easy law cannot bring them to it. What is called an easy law? It is when rewards are few and authority weak, and when depraved doctrines are not obstructed. What are called depraved doctrines? They are when sophistry and knowledge are valued, when itinerant politicians receive office, and when scholarship and private reputations are in evidence. When these 3 are not barred, then people will not fight and affairs fail. For when rewards are few, then there is no advantage in obedience. When authority is weak, then there is no harm in transgression. Therefore, depraved doctrines are started in order to mislead the people, and to make them fight while the law is easy, is like setting a cat to bait a rat. Is that not impossible? Therefore, he who desires to make his people fight sees to it that the law is severe. Consequently, rewards will be numerous, authority will be strict, depraved doctrines will be obstructed, those engaged in sophistry and knowledge will not be honored, itinerant politicians will not be employed in office, scholarship and private reputations will not be in evidence. If rewards are numerous and authority strict, then people, seeing that in war rewards are many, will forget the danger of death, and seeing their degradation when there is no war, will find life hard. When rewards make them forget the danger of death, and strict authority causes them to find life hard, and moreover, depraved doctrines are barred, in this manner meeting the enemy would be like shooting, with a crossbow of 100 pikuls capacity, a floating leaf. How would it be possible for it not to perish? Of the internal affairs of the people, there is nothing harder than agriculture. Therefore, an easy administration cannot bring them to it. What is called an easy administration? When farmers are poor and merchants are rich, when clever people gain profit and itinerant office seekers are numerous. So the farmers, in spite of their extremely hard labor, gain little profit and are worse off than merchants and shopkeepers and all manner of clever people. If one succeeds in restricting the number of these latter, then, even if one wished to, one could not prevent a state from becoming rich. Therefore, as it said, if one wishes to enrich the country through agriculture, then within the borders grain must be dear. Taxes for those who are not farmers must be many, and dues on market profit must be heavy, with the result that people are forced to have land. As those who have no land are obliged to buy their grain, grain will be dear, and those who have land will thus profit. When those who have land gain profit, there will be many who will occupy themselves with agriculture. When grain is dear and the dealing in it is not profitable, while, moreover, heavy taxes are imposed, then people cannot fail to abolishents and shopkeepers and all manner of clever folk, and to occupy themselves in the profit from the soil. So the strength of the people will be fully exerted in the profit from the soil. Therefore, he who organizes a state should let his soldiers have the full benefit of the profits on the frontiers, and let the farmers have the full benefit from the profits of the market. If the first happens, the state will be strong, and if the second happens, it will be rich. Therefore, one who abroad is strong in warfare, and at home is rich in peace, attains supremacy. Chapter 23. Prince and Minister. In the days of antiquity, before the time when there were princes and ministers, superiors and inferiors, the people were disorderly and were not well administered, and so the sages made a division between the noble and the humble. They regulated rank and position, and established names and appellations, in order to distinguish the ideas of prince and minister, of superior and inferior. As the territory was extensive, the people numerous and all things many, they made a division of 5 kinds of officials, and maintained it. As the people were numerous, wickedness and depravity originated, so they established laws and regulations, and created weights and measures in order to prohibit them, and in consequence there were the idea of prince and minister, the distinctions between the 5 kinds of officials, and the interdicts of the laws and regulations, to which it was necessary to pay heed. If, when occupying the position of prince, one's mandates are not carried out, one is in peril. When there is no constancy in the distinctions between the 5 kinds of officials, there is disorder. When laws and regulations have been set up, and yet private notions of virtue are practiced, then people do not stand in fear of punishment. When the prince is respected, his mandates are carried out. When officials have been well trained, there is constancy. And when laws and regulations are clear, people stand in fear of punishment. If laws and regulations are not clear, then it is impossible to obtain from the people the observance of mandates. If the people do not observe the mandates, but you want the prince to be respected, even a man with the wisdom of Yao and Shun would not be able to govern well. The way in which an intelligent prince administers the empire is to do so according to the law and to reward according to merit. It is the hankering for rank and emoluments that prompts people to fight energetically and not to shun death. The way in which an intelligent prince administers a state is to award soldiers who have had the merit of making decapitations or of capturing prisoners with such rank as will really give honor, and to grant them such emoluments as will be sufficient for them to live on, and to farmers who do not leave their ground, sufficient to nourish both their parents and to keep their family affairs in order. Thus, soldiers in the army will fulfill their duty even to death, and farmers will not be negligent. But the princes of the present time do not act thus. They relax the law and keep to knowledge. They turn their backs on merit and keep to people of reputation. Therefore, soldiers do not fight and farmers are migratory. I have heard that the gate through which the people are guided depends on where their superiors lead. Therefore, whether one succeeds in making people farm or fight, or in making them into traveling politicians, or in making them into scholars, depends on what their superiors encourage. If their superiors encourage merit and labor, people will fight. If they encourage the odes and book of history, people will become scholars. For people's attitude towards profit is just like the tendency of water to flow downwards, without preference for any of the 4 sides. The people are only interested in obtaining profit, and it depends on what their superiors encourage, what they will do. If men with angry eyes, who clench their fists and call themselves brave, are successful, if men in flowing robes, who idly talk, are successful, if men who waste their time and spend their days in idleness and save their efforts for obtaining benefit through private channels are successful. If these three kinds of people, though they have no merit, all obtain respectful treatment, then people will leave off farming and fighting and will do this. Either they will extort it by discussions and suggestions, or they will ask for it by practicing flattery, or they will struggle for it by acts of bravery. Thus farmers and fighters will dwindle daily, and itinerant office seekers will increase more and more, with the result that the country will fall into disorder, the land will be dismembered, the army will be weak, and the ruler debased. This would be the result of relaxing laws and regulations, and placing reliance on men of fame and reputation. Therefore is an intelligent ruler cautious with regard to laws and regulations. He does not hearken to words which are not in accordance with the law. He does not exalt actions which are not in accordance with the law. He does not perform deeds which are not in accordance with the law. But he hearkens to words which are in accordance with the law. He exalts actions which are in accordance with the law. He performs deeds which are in accordance with the law. Thus the state will enjoy order, the land will be wide, the army will be strong, and the ruler will be honored. This is the climax of good government, and it is imperative for a ruler of men to examine it. Chapter 24. Interdicts and Encouragements. The method by which a ruler of men prohibits and encourages is by means of rewards and penalties. Rewards follow merit, and penalties follow crime. Therefore, is it necessary to be careful in appraising merit and in investigating crime. Now, rewards exalt and punishments debase, but if the superiors have no definite knowledge of their method, it is no better than if they had no method at all. But the method for right knowledge is power and figures. Therefore, the early kings did not rely on their strength, but on their power or shy. They did not rely on their belief, but on their figures. Now, for example, a floating seed of the peng plant, meeting a whirlwind, may be carried 1,000 li because it rides on the power of the wind. If, in measuring an abyss, you know that it is 1,000 fathoms deep, it is owing to the figures which you find by dropping a string. So by depending on the power of a thing, you will reach a point, however distant it may be. And by keeping the proper figures, you will find out the depth, however deep it may be. Now, for example, in the darkness of the night, even a Li Lu cannot see a great mountain forest, but in the clear morning light, with the brilliant sun, he can distinguish the flying birds above, and below he can see an autumn hare, for the vision of the eye is dependent on the power of the sun. When the highest condition of power is reached, things are arranged without a multitude of officials and are made fitting by expounding the system. But nowadays, reliance is placed on a multitude of offices and a host of civil servants, and in the official bureau assistants and controllers are appointed. Now the idea of appointing these assistants and controllers is indeed to prevent men from making profit, but these assistants and controllers themselves also desire to make profit. How then can they prevent others from doing so? Therefore, if one relies on assistants and controllers for one's administration, then will it be an administration that can barely maintain itself. It is not thus, if one understands system. One separates their power and puts checks on their conduct. Therefore is it said, if the conditions of power are such that it is difficult to conceal anything, then even a man like Ji does no wrong. Therefore, the early kings prized power or shi. Some say, a ruler of men holds a nominal right of consent post factum, then things are controlled and examined, and by this control wickedness is discovered. I do not think that this is right. For officials exert sole authority and take decisions 1,000 li away from the ruler. In the 12th month, to confirm it, they make a report in which the affairs of the whole year have separate entries. But as the ruler gives but one hearing, Although he sees doubtful cases, he cannot determine whether an official is capable or otherwise. This part of the text is lost. The next extant part starts as, for example, if objects come near, the eye cannot but see them. If words are insistent, the ear cannot but hear them. For if objects approach, they alter in appearance, and if words draw near, they form coherent speech. So with the organization in a well-governed state, people cannot escape punishment any more than the eyes can hide from the mind what they see. But in the disorderly states of the present time, it is not thus. Reliance is placed on a multitude of offices and a host of civil servants. But however numerous the civil servants may be, their affairs are the same, and they belong to one body. Now those whose affairs are the same, and who belong to one body, cannot control one another. But by making their interests different and their disadvantages dissimilar, the early kings created guarantees. Therefore, in a condition of complete good government, husband and wife and friends cannot abandon each other's evil, cover up wrongdoing, and not cause harm to relatives, nor can the men from the people mutually conceal each other from their superiors and government servants. That is because, although their affairs are connected, their interests are different. But nowadays a Zhou and a Yu cannot control each other, because their business is the same and their interests are also similar. This part of the text is lost. The next extant part starts as, suppose that horses could speak, then a Zhou and a Yu would have no chance of escaping what they find hateful. That is because their interests would be different. When interests are connected and what they hate is the same, then a father cannot reprimand his son, nor a prince his minister. The relation of government servants to other government servants is this, that their interests are connected and what they hate is the same. Now the early kings made it a principle that those whose business was connected should have different interests. Though the people may hide things from their ruler, there is no harm done in thus covering them up, nor can there be advantage in having virtuous men or harm in having worthless ones. The system, therefore, of good government is to neglect the virtuous and to abolish the wise. Chapter 25. Attention to Law. Generally, there is no one in the world who does not base order on the causes of disorder. Therefore, to a limited degree of order corresponds a limited degree of disorder, and to a great degree of order corresponds a great degree of disorder. There is no ruler of men who can give order to his people for all time, nor is there a country in the world that has not known disorder. What do I mean by saying that one bases order on the causes of disorder? Raising virtuous and capable men is the cause of bringing order into the world, but it is also the cause of order becoming disorder. Those whom the world calls virtuous are men whose words are upright. The reason why they are regarded as upright in words is due to their partisans. Hearing their words, one takes them to be capable, and on asking their partisans, one thinks that they are indeed so. Therefore, one prizes them without waiting for them to acquire actual merit, or one punishes them without waiting for them to commit crimes. In these circumstances, vile officials are given precisely the opportunity to accomplish their wicked and dangerous acts, and small-minded men have an opportunity to apply their dexterous and crafty tricks. If in the beginning a basis for wickedness and craftiness is provided for officials and people, then if finally one tries to make them correct and guileless, even a great sage like you could not succeed in causing as many as 10 men to be like that. How then could an ordinary ruler manage the people of the whole country in this way? Those people who form parties with others do not need us for obtaining success, and if superiors pull one way with the people, then the latter will turn their backs on the ruler's position and will turn towards private connections. When this is the case, the prince will be weak and his ministers strong. And if the ruler does not understand this, then if the country is not annexed by the feudal lords, it will be robbed by the people. Both stupid and wise will, alike, try to acquire that power of eloquence, and if scholars study with those eloquent speakers, then people will lose touch with reality and will recite empty phrases. Should this be the case, then their strength will decrease and wrongdoing will increase. And if the prince does not understand it, in battle he will lose his generals, and in defense his cities will certainly be sold. Therefore, if there is an intelligent ruler or a loyal minister born in this age who wishes to lead his country, then he should not for one moment be forgetful of the law, but he should conquer and destroy cabals, control and abolish eloquence, and relying on the law, the country will enjoy order. If a condition is brought about where, for government servants, there is no other standard maintained than the law, then, however tricky they may be, they will be unable to commit wickedness. And if, for the people, a condition is brought about where there is no other way of exerting their capacities than in war, then, however great the danger may be, no deceit will be possible. Indeed, if people control each other by law and recommend each other by following systematic rules, then they cannot benefit each other with praise, nor harm each other with slander. If the people see that there is no benefit in praising each other, they will become used to loving each other without flattery. And if they see that there is no harm in slandering each other, they will become used to hating each other without injuring each other. If the love of men does not mean flattery, and the hatred of men does not mean causing injury, then both love and hatred will be pure, which is the highest degree of order. Therefore do I say, if one relies on law, the country will enjoy order. A country of 1,000 chariots is able to preserve itself by defense, and a country of 10,000 chariots is able to round itself off by fighting. Even a bad ruler like Jie would not be able to twist one word of this statement in order to subdue his enemies. And if abroad, one is incapable of waging war, and at home one is incapable of defense, then even a good ruler like Yao could not pacify, for any misbehavior, a country that normally would be no match. Looking at it from this point of view, that through which the country is important and that through which the ruler is honored is force. Force being the basis of both, how is it then that no ruler on earth succeeds in developing force? Bring about a condition where people find it bitter not to till, and where they find it dangerous not to fight. These are two things which filial sons, though they dislike them, do for their father's sake, and loyal ministers, though they dislike them, do for their sovereign's sake. Nowadays, if you wish to stimulate the multitude of people to make them do what even filial sons and loyal ministers dislike doing, I think it is useless unless you compel them by means of punishments, and stimulate them by means of rewards. But nowadays, the ordinary types of ruler all neglect laws and measures, and rely on sophistry and cleverness. They push back men of merit and force, and advance those of benevolence and righteousness, with the result that people do not devote themselves to agriculture and warfare. If such people do not turn their energies to agriculture, at home their food supply will be exhausted, and if they do not turn to their duty in warfare, abroad the army will be weak. Then, though one may have a territory of 10,000 li and 1,000,000 armed men, it will be the same as a plain that has to depend on its own resources. Furthermore, the early kings were able to command their people to walk on bare swords and to suffer arrows and stones, and the people were willing to do so, not because they liked learning such things, but because they escaped harm thereby. Therefore my teaching is to issue such orders that people, if they are desirous of profit, can attain their aim only by agriculture, and if they want to avoid harm, can only escape it by war. There will be no one within the borders who will not devote himself at first to plowing and fighting, in order thereby later to obtain that which gives him pleasure. Therefore, though the territory may be small, the produce will be plentiful, and though the population may be sparse, the army will be strong. If one can achieve these two things within the territory, then the road to becoming a Lord Protector or King of the whole empire is fully prepared. Chapter 26. Gongsun Shang replied, "There should be instituted, for the laws, government officers who are able to understand the contents of the decrees, and who should be the regulators of the empire. Then they should memorialize the Son of Heaven, whereupon the Son of Heaven would personally preside over the law and promulgate it. All should then issue to their inferiors the mandates they have received, and the law officers should preside personally over the law and promulgate it. When people venture to neglect practicing the items named in the promulgations of the officers presiding over the law, then each one is punished according to the item in the law which he has neglected. In the eventuality of these officers who preside over the law being transferred or dying, students should be made to read the contents of the law, and a standard of knowledge should be fixed for them, so that, within a certain number of days, they should know the contents of the law, and for those students who do not reach the standard, a law is made for punishing them. Should anyone dare to tamper with the text of the law, to erase or add one single character or more, he shall be condemned to death without pardon. Whenever government officials or people have questions about the meaning of the laws or mandates, to ask of the officers presiding over the law, the officers should, in each case, answer clearly according to the laws and mandates about which it was originally desired to ask questions, and they should, in each case, prepare a tablet of the length of 1 foot 6 inches, on which should be distinctly inscribed the year, month, day, and hour, as well as the items of law about which questions were asked, for the information of the government officials or of the people. Should the officers who preside over the law not give the desired information, they should be punished according to the contents of the law. That is, they should be punished according to the law about which the government officials or people have asked information. The officers presiding over the law should forthwith give to those government officials who ask information about the law the left half of the document, and they themselves should store carefully the wooden bindings with the right half of the document, keep them in a room, and seal them with the seal of the chief of the Office of Laws and Mandates. Later, on the death of the officer, affairs should be transacted according to these files. All the laws and mandates should be put together as a set, one set being kept in the palace of the Son of Heaven. Forbidden archives should be built for the laws, which are locked with lock and key to prevent admittance, and are sealed up. Herein should be stored one set of the laws and mandates. Inside the forbidden archives they should be sealed with a seal forbidding their opening. Whoever ventures unauthorizedly to break the seals of the forbidden archives, or to enter the forbidden archives, to inspect the forbidden laws and mandates, or to tamper with one or more characters of the forbidden laws, shall in any of these cases be guilty of death without pardon. Once a year laws and mandates shall be received for prohibitions and orders to be issued. The Son of Heaven shall set up 3 law officers, one in the palace, one in the office of the Yushi, together with a government official, and one in the chancery of the Chengxiang. In the various prefectures and sub-prefectures of the feudal lords shall be instituted one law officer, together with government officials, all of whom shall be similar to the law officers in Qin. Thus the prefectures and sub-prefectures and the feudal lords shall all alike receive a knowledge of the laws and mandates in the archives, and moreover the aforementioned government officials and people, who are desirous of knowing the law, shall all address their inquiries to these law officers. Thus there shall be no one among the government officials and people of the empire who does not know the law, and as the officials are clearly aware that the people know the laws and mandates, they dare not treat the people contrary to the law, nor dare the people transgress the law, as they would come into conflict with the law officers. If in their treatment of the people, the government officials do not act according to the law, the former should inquire of the law officer, who should at once inform them of the punishment for the illegal action in question fixed by the law. The people should then at once inform the government officials, formally, of the law officer's statement. Thus the government officials, knowing that such is the course of events, dare not treat the people contrary to the law, nor do the people dare infringe the law. In this way, government officials and the people of the empire, however virtuous or good, however sophistical or sagacious they may be, cannot add one word to twist the law, nor, though they may have 1,000 pieces of gold, can they use 1/24 of an ounce of it for such a purpose. Thus the knowing and crafty ones, as well as the virtuous and capable, will all force themselves to behave well, and will do their best to restrain themselves and to serve the public weal. When people are stupid, they are easy to govern. All this originates from the fact that the law is clear, easy to know, and strictly applied. Law is the authoritative principle for the people, and is the basis of government. It is what shapes the people. Trying to govern while eliminating the law is like a desire not to be hungry while eliminating food, or a desire not to be cold while eliminating clothes, or a desire to go east while one moves west. It is clear enough that there is no hope of realizing it. That 100 men will chase after a single hare that runs away is not for the sake of the hare, for when they are sold everywhere on the market, even a thief does not dare to take one away, because their legal title is definite. Thus, if the legal title is not definite, then even men like Yao, Shun, Yu, or Tang would all rush to chase after it. But if the legal title is definite, even a poor thief would not take it. Now, if laws and mandates are not clear, nor their titles definite, the men of the empire have opportunities for discussion. In their discussions they will differ, and there will be no definiteness. If above the ruler of men makes laws, but below the inferior people discuss them, the laws will not be definite, and inferiors will become superiors. This may be called a condition where rights and duties are indefinite. When rights and duties are indefinite, even men like Yao and Shun will become crooked and commit acts of wickedness. How much more than the mass of the people? This is the way in which wickedness and wrongdoing will be greatly stimulated. The ruler of men will be despoiled of his authority and power, will ruin his country, and bring disaster upon the altar of the soil and grain. Now the former sages made writings and transmitted them to later generations, and it is necessary to accept these as authoritative, so that one may know what is conveyed by established terminology. Should they not be accepted as authoritative, and should people discuss them according to ideas of their own mind, then until their death they will not succeed in understanding the terminology and its meaning. Therefore did the sages set up officers and officials for the laws and mandates, who should be authoritative in the empire, in order to define everyone's rights and duties, so that these being definite, the very crafty would become faithful and trustworthy, and the people would all become honest and guileless, each one restraining himself. For indeed, the defining of everybody's rights and duties is the road that leads to orderly government, but the not defining of everybody's rights and duties is the road that leads to disorder. So where there is a tendency towards order, there cannot be disorder, and where there is a tendency towards disorder, there cannot be order. Indeed, where there is a tendency towards disorder, and one governs it, the disorder will only increase. But where there is a tendency towards order and one governs it, there will be order. Therefore, the sage kings governed order and did not govern disorder. Indeed, subtle and mysterious words, which have to be pondered over, cause difficulty even to men of superior knowledge. There may be one case in 10 millions where the directing guidance of the law is not needed, and yet it is correct in everything. Therefore, a sage governs the empire for the 10 million cases. For indeed, one should not make laws so that only the intelligent can understand them, for the people are not all intelligent. And one should not make laws so that only the men of talent can understand them, for the people are not all talented. Therefore did the sages, in creating laws, make them clear and easy to understand, and the terminology correct, so that stupid and wise without exception could understand them. And by setting up law officers and officers presiding over the law, to be authoritative in the empire, prevented the people from falling into dangerous pitfalls. So the fact that when the sages established the empire, there were no victims of capital punishment was not because capital punishment did not exist, but because the laws which were applied were clear and easy to understand. They set up law officers and government officials to be the authority in order to guide them, and they knew that if the 10,000s of people all knew what to avoid and what to strive for, they would avoid misfortune and strive for happiness, and so restrain themselves. Therefore, an intelligent prince follows the existing conditions of order, and so makes the order complete, with the result that the empire will enjoy great order. Our audiobook ends here. Thank you for listening. If you want any particular book in this channel, please let us know in the comments.